Good evening, everyone, both here in the chambers and watching on the live stream or on the Zoom session. I'm going to call this regular Committee of the Whole meeting to order. This is October the 18th. As we gather here, we just want to acknowledge that we're gathering on the traditional territories of the Coast and the Straits Salish peoples. Specifically, we recognize Lekwungen-speaking peoples, known today as the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations, and that their historic connections to these lands continue to this day. Up first, we have an approval of the agenda. Can I have it moved and seconded? Any other discussion on that? Councillor Zelka?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Much appreciated. I do note this is a committee of the whole meeting, and in our procedures bylaw, this allows full unfettered public participation, and very much appreciated for that. But I do also note that the last two committee of the wholes were cancelled, which meant the last time the public had a chance to speak to us about anything was, I think, June of last year. Soon there'll be some discussions, I'm sure, about possibly revisiting our community engagement, since I feel we have some work to do in this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Not really related to the agenda, but we'll take it. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Moving on to the public comment and question period. This period, I know we have one caller who is registered to speak, but it's also available for others who wish to call in and speak to us. We are back in chambers, so we have diligently made it possible for people to come into this chamber as well, although we have very limited space. We are making that effort as well. So according to our procedures bylaw, we have up to 30 minutes in total. And each speaker will be allocated up to 3 minutes to say what they wish to say. I believe we have one registered speaker. Ms. Kaye, no? Mrs. Williams? No.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, she doesn't appear to have arrived at this point.
Okay. I'm gonna call in case she's watching the stream, in case anybody's watching the stream and coming in at that point. So if anybody wishes to address council, this is an open call for anything related to the municipality of Okabe. We are here to listen, and so I'll let you call in. I will remind all members of the community, however, that we are very, very available as a council and as staff to answer questions. I recently had some questions arise on social media about their people's utilities bills. And I made the point that you can always call and ask questions on that. So we have, I think, one caller calling in on this. So thank you for the caller. If I'm just going to ask, we ask that all speakers state your name and municipality of residence, and then welcome to the meeting. We can't hear. Is there, Ms. Williams, is there a speaker?
Nobody at this point, Your Worship. There is a phone number, but that is a staff member who's attending by phone.
Okay, thank you for that. I will give it another minute or so here in case anybody wishes to join us. And I'm taking a little time here just because there is a delay between when we're speaking in this chamber and when it arrives through the live stream. It's an unavoidable process as part as we go through and make the stream available through multiple platforms, including YouTube. So I'm just waiting to see. I don't see any other hands raised. So I think I am going to move us forward to allow us to move on with the agenda. Not seeing any other hands or people indicating they wish to speak. However, you see the phone numbers. If you're watching the live stream on there, you may call in. And if you do, you can hit *9. Just for the record, all items on the agenda tonight are open to public input. And so if you're wishing to speak to any of those items on the agenda tonight, we will ask for your input as we come to those agenda items. So with that, we'll move on the agenda to item number 4.1, which is the development tracker. And I believe we have Ms. Costin, Ms. McDougall, and Ms. Curry here to present. And I think they're joining us virtually through the Zoom platform. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, Your Worship, and I could do a quick introduction if you like.
Great.
That'd be great. Thank you, Ms. Varela. And speaking now is our Chief Administrative Officer, Ms. Varela. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this item is before you tonight as an information piece. This has been a significant piece of work done by staff, and there's a lot to be proud of in this. It continues with our transparency and accountability program, So staff have been working diligently and are getting ready to go live with the draft that's before you tonight for presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rella. And who is going to be the principal speaker here? Is it Ms. Costin?
Yes, Your Worship.
All right. Welcome, Ms. Costin.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I appreciate the opportunity to present this application that we've been working so hardly on.
Ms. Costin, can I just ask you to speak a little louder?
Can you hear me?
Just if you could speak a little bit louder. We're just having a bit of a hard time hearing you in here.
Great, just one moment now. Is that better?
That is better.
Okay. I'll try and talk loudly. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Staff are excited to introduce you to the new development tracker application. It's an online tool to provide the public with information on current development applications within the District of Oak Bay. Tonight, I'd like to provide a high-level presentation on the tracker's functionality. Staff recognize that there'll be a lot of information presented tonight, so there is additional instructions online to help navigate through the tracker, and we're also working on an instructional video for the public, which will be posted on the website when completed. Please note, there are no subdivision applications on the tracker, and all applications with a start date from June 1st, 2021 onward will be visible on the tracker only. The tracker is subject to ongoing refinement as we perfect our processes and technology is improved. I will be available to council to assist the navigation of the application afterwards if necessary, and if the public requires assistance, please contact the Oak Bay Planning Department and they will be happy to help. So let's get underway. So to access the development tracker, go to the main page of the website, the Oak Bay website, and under the Spotlight section, there's a link. So just click on that. It will take you to the main page of the tracker. This page provides information on the application types and the functionality and instructions for search features. To access the actual tracker, there's a button here that called Launch the Development Tracker. So this is, oh, sorry, you know what? There we go. So I had some filters on previous to this. So as we see the main page of the development tracker, the left-hand side lists all the applications and the application types to be accessed. When you initially launch the tracker, it goes to the active applications only, but you do have the choice to go to archived applications. If by chance you want to just click on, say, one type of application, say the advisory design panel application type, you can click on advisory design panel and then go apply selected filters. What this will do will only show the advisory design panel applications. To get rid of the filter, you can click on all filter, clear all filters, and then it'll bring you back to the main pages. So each page holds 20 applications. And as you can see, we have quite a bit of applications here. There's several pages that are currently on. I think there's over 100 applications on the website right now. The main application area in the green with the green background lists all the current applications, as I said. There is a filter search at the top of the application. So you can search by address. So if you click down and go address, you can search by the first 4 characters of the address. So if you wanted to, it's numeric and alphabetic. So for instance, if I wanted to type in 3040, it'll give me all the addresses with 3040 in the Oak Bay district. Alternatively, if I want to search on beach for Beach Drive, it'll give me every address that is in the land-based management system, which is Tempest. Some of them may have applications, some may not. So I recommend not going such a broad search. You'll be able to find it a lot better if you don't, if you know, or even just search and scroll down to see which addresses are available in the tracker itself. Another search function that's not quite available at the moment, it's the neighborhood search. We are currently working on downloading the new neighborhood structure into the Tempest system, and that should be available shortly. So I'm just gonna go back up to filter search just so I can get all the applications there. So to access any of the folders, you just click into the folder, you can click in details or anywhere in this box, and it will show the details of the folder. What comes up is the applicant contact, the project type, which is an advisory design panel, the folder number for internal purposes, the application date, the address of the application, city contact information, and the status of the folder itself. It's either active or archived, and an explanation on the purpose of the folder itself. Relevant links are there for the public to access further information if required to as well. Off to the right-hand side, there's a Google map that actually shows the location of the property itself. You have the ability to zoom in, zoom out, and also look at the address view if you so wish, or street view if you so wish. In the next section, there's the documents. This lists the proposed plans for the public to view online. Simply click on the document and it comes up as a PDF and you'll be able to see it. So that's a lot different from having to go into the hall and retrieving the information from the hall. You can see it online in your own home. So the next area is the scheduled council meetings. So this section, it indicates if there are pending or scheduled public meetings and the proposed date of the meeting. The public meeting status will show pending if until confirmed by corporate services, at which time the pending status will be changed to scheduled, and then the meeting date will be confirmed. In the next section, there's the task progress. This lists all the tasks in the folder. Tasks have been made, or staff have been made a conscious effort to add additional tasks to provide the public with more information so they can see it online. If you notice I'm hovering over one of the tasks, it actually gives you the description of the task. So if I just go down, each task has a different description. It shows the start date of the step of the task, and it shows the completed date. And any task that's in gray is completed. Any task that is in yellow is current and in progress at the moment. The bottom window is a disclaimer with a link to the district's privacy policy. Up in the corner, there's the menu selection, and this gives you further ways to navigate through the application. A really great feature that the development tracker has is the ability for the public to sign up. To actually view if there's any changes to the tracker tasks at all. So how you sign up is you can click on, if we click on menu and go to manage my subscriptions, and you can log in from here. Oak Bay residents, some Oak Bay residents might already have a My City login. If they receive their utility bill online or access their property tax information, all they need to do is log in here. Other than that, they can click on here to register, and they can fill in their information and create their own login so they're able to access the subscriptions for the tracker. So I'm just going to go ahead and click log in. And I'm just going to log out because I was already logged in. And I need to, sorry. So I'm going to go log in right here. Great. So I can manage my subscriptions from here. And I can click on the side to say if I want to view individual applications, or you can select the select all button. But forewarning, if you select all the all button, you will get emails that on every time a task is changed or a document is loaded to the tracker. So I would be very cautious not to select them all because you will get your inbox quite full in your Outlook. So a sample of I'm just going to bring it over. A sample of the email of the development tracker you would get is a task status update, and basically says this is to inform you the status of folder, our internal folder number for address 93 King George Terrace has been updated. And please click here to access the development tracker. So that's a great functionality. So if people want to track to see if tasks are completed and what have you. So to go back, you would click on your main button here and back to the search field, and you'll get the main page again. So that concludes my presentation, and staff are available to answer any questions mayor and council may have at this time.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Costin. Very interesting presentation. I'm going to just also remind the public, if anybody from the public wishes to ask or to make comments, you're more than welcome to do so after council's had a chance to ask questions and get clarification. So with that, I'll go to council. Are there any questions of Ms. Costin? Go ahead, Councillor Green, and then Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Mayor. And I don't really have any questions. I just want to first say congratulations to staff and to Ms. Costin for getting this going. And it's a wonderful achievement. Actually, we've talked about it, I think, this term quite often. And I'm really very pleased with the outcome. And thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes, thank you. Incredible that this is live. Thank you so much. I was wondering what you were up to, Ms. Costin. I'm very, very impressed, and at this incredible amount of work that you and staff were able to pull together. And I am reminded of a gentleman named Steve Bowker, who's the late Steve Bowker, who first alerted me to this particular feature built into the development tracker. I'm sorry, the Tempest system many, many years ago. And so it is really lovely to see that this thing going live. And I just want to say thank you very much. I plan on subscribing to everything for at least a day, just for fun.
You must have more time than I do in your life. Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I don't see any other hands up here. I'll go to Councillor Patterson, and then if I'm certainly welcome to take comments or questions, but we can also go to the public if anybody has any other comments. Then we'll just go to proceed. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I too congratulate Ms. Costin and other members of the department that would have assisted in putting all this together. As I'm quickly scrolling through it, I didn't manage to keep up to all of the instructions that were given. So, but nevertheless, there is a lot of information in here. And so I am curious about the time requirement to put all of this in, if it's a smooth transition between inputting the applications into, I suppose, the building master system, and if this is duplication or it's all done kind of sequentially in one step or whatnot, because there's a lot of information in here.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Ms. Costin, what is the administrative overhead of managing this?
Through you, Mayor. Actually, it's not that much more. It's as soon as you enter a folder on the Tempest application, there's just a couple of items that we need to do. We need to enter the application contact and the city contact. But other than that, and also, well, and to post the documents there. But as tasks are updated, they're actually updated in the development tracker. So that's really great. And yeah, so not that much overhead in addition to the existing business process.
Thank you very much for that information, Mayor. That's really great to know, and I know there have been many members of the community that have been asking for this for quite some period of time, so I'm sure they'll be delighted, and I'm sure to any members of the community that have applications in the process, this is certainly an easy way for them to find out the status of it without having to constantly be calling the hall to find out what's going on. So congratulations on getting this, bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Go ahead, Councillor Nay.
Just a quick question. I mean, yeah, real kudos to staff for making this happen. I know it'll be very welcome by the public and to applicants who can track where things are and yeah, so this is a great addition to the inventory of other tools that staff has been involved with. The real quick question is, does this, it's a piece of software, and does it have a continued cost to it? Just wondering, I presume there was a upfront cost for the purchase of the software, and just wondering for what the ongoing costs are of the
So
software.
through you, Mayor, there is always any application or any module that's purchased through our software companies. There's always an additional cost. It wasn't significant, and there is an ongoing annual fee, which is usually 10 or 20% of the initial cost. So it was more staff's time implementing the project itself. It's just took a lot of time to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Costin. Councillor Nay, anything else?
No, so is there a number you could let us know just for our, is there, like, what was the cost of it up front? I guess that's really the question. Just a ballpark, or maybe there's somebody else that could answer.
Ms. Costin, do you have a number for us?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I believe there was a bigger budget because it included staff's time, but the application itself with the third party, we had to engage Up and Up. It's around the $10,000 mark, but the application itself was about $6,000, and then it would be 20% of that fee annually going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. I guess just for any of the public that are watching right now, any new software implementation I've ever seen has some glitch that shows up at some point. So is that just using the usual, providing feedback through the website if there's anything that's found that people have questions on or have observed? Just do that through the website, Ms. Costin?
Yes, through you, Mayor. Definitely, they can certainly contact or the planning department, building and planning. Ms. Curry is the super user for the module, and she'll be happy to answer any questions or let me know.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Question when you have a moment, Chairman, Mayor.
Yeah, sure. I'll just go. I just want to acknowledge when the point made of the Ms. Costin on this one about the automation process of this. I fully acknowledge that to get things to work that smoothly, automatically, there's an awful lot of work required to work with all of the different people in the department to understand their processes and apply them to the software in a way that actually works. So I just want to express my appreciation for taking that time, because I think if it's not that automatic, they have a tendency to sort of get less useful over time as the information isn't added. So thank you for that. And go ahead again, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the second time to speak on this item. Last January the 25th, we, Council, approved $16,600 for the software and implementation of this development tracker, including or excluding staff time. Just a curiosity in terms of budgeting and in terms of actuals. How to go on the budget? Under, over, or just or right on?
No, I believe we're under budget on this project.
Fantastic. Even better. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I don't see any other hands up. I don't see any hands on my screen here from the public who wish to speak. Any calls in? I don't see any, so I'm happy to... I'm going to just have a motion to receive, and then I'm going to go back to the public input session because Ms. Kaye, who had registered, is now joined us, so I'll go back to the public input portion. Moved and seconded. So that's just motion to make sure I got the motion correct in front of me here, but I think it's just a motion to receive the report. So seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much, Ms. Costin, Ms. Curry, and Ms. McDougall for all the work to bring this to fruition. And I'm hoping it'll lower the workload at the Building and Planning Department over time, as people can look things up for themselves rather than having to call all the time for the information. So with council's or the committee's indulgence, I'm just going to go back to section 3.1. We had a registered speaker, Ms. Kaye, who had registered to speak with us, but wasn't with us when we made the call. So I understand she's joined us now. Is that correct, Ms. Williams?
That is correct, Your Worship.
Okay, so why don't I welcome you to the meeting. Since you weren't here, I'll just let you know you have up to 3 minutes to speak to us about an item related to council. If you just start with your name and your municipality of residence, then we will move forward, and then you have 3 minutes to address us. Welcome, Ms. Kaye.
Thank you so much for giving me this time. I live in Victoria municipality. I received a traffic violation in November of 2020, and I contested the ticket because I felt that the intersection where I was cited for failure to obey a stop sign was problematic in the extreme. And I decided I would do some research on why it was that I failed to see that stop sign. So I feel there's a difference in failure to see a stop sign versus failure to obey. It did have a hearing and a trial. The trial resolved last Friday. I was found guilty. The fine that I received, $167, was reduced to $25, but I still get the points against my license. In my view, I think that I documented fairly accurately an aspect of driver behavior and a pattern of failure to see that stop sign by videotaping from across the street. This is the stop sign at Hibbins Close and Cadboro Bay Road, or you could say it's the stop sign at Beach Drive and Cadboro Bay Road. I'm not entirely sure. It's sort of like the convergence of those three roads. And I'm sure council and the mayor are well aware of the problematic nature of it. So what I identified is now publicly viewable on YouTube. I sent a link to mayor and council. I would recommend, I've been in touch with your head of public works in the municipality of Okabe, and he was receptive to speaking with or reaching out to the 3 traffic engineers, the road safety engineers I've talked to about this issue. And there seems to be a general consensus among the engineers that there's a problem that won't be resolved through signage, through illuminating the signage with blinking LED lights, that my video definitely highlights the pattern of why there is, well, on my watch, I was watching for 10, 12 minutes and filmed, 90% failure rate to stop at that stop sign. So traffic engineers say when there's a 25% failure rate, that's when they're called in to give advice. So it's an ongoing and extreme safety issue. I'm sure the residents there are well aware, but penalizing motorists is not the way to make that intersection safer. So I've spent a lot of my own time to try to advocate for public safety. And I very much hope that this issue will be put on the agenda. I hope your Public Works Department will take it up with these engineers that I've connected him to. And it's my fervent wish that your municipality be a safe place for pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kaye, and we did get your correspondence in the video, so I think we've all seen it. This is sitting at the engineering department. As you point out, it's been that whole strip down there has been a point of engineering work between Saanich and Okabe for a number of years now as changes have been implemented. So it's not over yet as we continue to do that. So I appreciate you sharing the information with us and with the engineering and police departments as well. So thank you for attending tonight.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. We're now going to move on with the agenda, back on to item number 5.1. And with us we have Mr. Olson, who is joining us to speak to the energy conservation in Okabe. This is essentially an annual presentation that we get from Mr. Olson to provide an update on what's been done to improve and manage our energy consumption and savings. And Mr. Olson, you see you on our screen here. So you have 10 minutes to make a presentation, and then we have time for questions from council and from the public before we get to a motion to receive the report. So with that, welcome, Mr. Olson.
Thank you, and I appreciate you having me here to share this information. I will find it first. If I can make it happen. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to get right into it then. Basically, I've got a bit of quite a long list of jobs that we've done over the years, and I just thought I'd highlight a few. Starting back in '85, all the way to the energy loop that we just finished in 2019. I just wanted to point a couple out as this major energy refit that we did in 1996. And that was one of the first ones that I was fully engaged in, and it stood out as an amazing opportunity for us. It highlighted just all the savings that we could get for energy and improvements in the building. And that included Henderson, Monterey, and we jumped forward to another major energy study, which involved all the buildings in Oak Bay in 2010, right up to LED streetlights that are just wrapping up. So that being said, I guess the point is we've been doing this for a very long time, and the savings have been really adding up. Actual and avoided costs from conservation measures are now over $1.5 million in yearly savings, and in yearly savings are up to about $675,000. It's also worth mentioning that even though we've got this list with all these jobs we thought we did, and we know we did, we have savings beyond that, which can be accounted for in behavioral and awareness changes and things of that nature. From that huge list, we have accounted 17,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions that have been eliminated through the projects that we've done over the years, and now we're saving about 1,167 tons per year. So that's every year. So that's basically the equivalent of annual greenhouse gas savings from about 158 average cars for a year, about 15 tanker trucks worth of gasoline, 500,000 liters of gasoline consumed, and you can see the rest of the comparisons there. In 2007, we signed on to the Climate Action Charter and adopted an aspirational goal of reducing our greenhouse gases by 33% by 2020 over our 2007 levels. So, but when we jumped into that, from my end, I was going, wow, we already did so many things before 2007 came along. How can we deal with lowering it that much when we've already dealt with all our low-hanging fruit? Thankfully, the more you look, the more you find. And with new energy study, new technologies, we're able to reduce our consumption by another 37% from that 2007 mark on. So the electricity consumption is now down almost $2 million over that 2007 level. So we doing a good job there. Also, 2007, our natural gas since then has gone down 51%. So that's been a huge help in saving our greenhouse gas numbers. Again, we'd already done a lot before 2007, and we still found lots of projects that would continue reducing that. So that's 406 tons a year just from this one area. So I'll just talk about the rec center for a while. 1993, the electrical consumption was almost $5 million for just this one building, not including the tennis bubbles, just the rec center. In 2019, it decreased to 2,300,000 kilowatts, so a reduction of 2.6 million kilowatt hours, or 53%. So that's enough to power 250 homes a year. And you'll see a little slight bump on the last 2019, and that's the addition of our energy recovery loop that helps us save our the natural gas. So, and just a couple comments. We still use the same amount of electricity we did in '93. It would have cost Okabe Rec Center $542,000 last year. We paid $202,000, so that's $340,000 in our avoided costs. Also, now the entire municipality uses $1.5 million or million kilowatt hours less electricity than what just the rec center alone did back in 1993. And that 2019 numbers I'm using, I'm just in some cases ignoring 2020 due to COVID and some drops there that made it artificially low. So I thought 2019 is a fair comparison to where we should really be at for the next little while anyways. So natural gas again at the rec center. And again, when I mentioned that bump up in electricity, well, you can see the bump down in natural gas there for 2019. Of course, and that's from the big drop in our energy recovery loop that's helped us save so many gigajoules of energy. Like so natural gas down 67 over historic levels. So also just a little mention that the Zamboni was changed over to electric from propane back in 2011. That saved us $10,000 worth of propane bills that year. And didn't increase our electricity at all, as the heat wasn't needed to be removed from the arena after the Zamboni went on the ice. So that sort of was a nice wash. Talk about carbon neutrality and the CARE program. There was two parts to it, and this is what we've been dealing with for the last 10 plus years is the CARE reporting and carbon balancing. So the main thing was to do all we can to lower carbon emissions, but then balance the emissions that we do put out, with positive actions. And this is an older slide from 2018, but I just wanted to put it up there because we've been carbon neutral since 2016 now, and we continue to this day. Now, unfortunately, although we've done an amazing job with our corporate emissions, part of the CARE program was also looking at what we can do for our community. And we haven't done as much as some municipalities there, but we've certainly done a great job in lowering our corporate emissions. The other part of that was, as I mentioned earlier, we signed on to that charter to lower our greenhouse gases by 33% by 2020. And we took care of that in 2019, and we backed it up again in 2020 at 43% reduction. So that's huge. As you can see, in 2015, we were almost there, but then, colder year, a couple mechanical breakdowns, and we slipped backwards. So that, we've got a cushion because this is quite sustainable for the future. And just mentioning most of the first savings that got us here were from the buildings, and the last few years it was our LED street lighting that really helped us get there. And unfortunately, not much from the fleet. And here's a look at our gas and diesel use, and you see the green line doesn't go down very much, probably mostly due to efficiencies in newer vehicles over the years. In fairness, though, there hasn't been a lot of meaningful options there, but this is all changing rapidly. Over the last few years, there have been a number of fleet vehicles going electric, and it's been steadily growing with garbage trucks, street sweepers, and now a couple lineups for Ford and Chevy are coming out with in 2002 for electric pickup trucks. So that might be a great step there, because as you can see that more than half Okabe's corporate greenhouse gas emissions are from the fleet. So it represents a huge opportunity there. So this this is a quick look at what our electrical savings targets were. And it's interesting, and we looked at this back in 2011, 12, you know, what can we do for targets? And we thought we'd set up a target that we could actually keep our cost even though we knew the price was going up. And so the little bubbles down there shows us what we thought we need to bring it down by year to get to where we thought we needed to be. And we did a great job of that, you know. So over the last 8 years, we lowered that by 27%. And the problem is, the bad news, we're paying 17% more in 2019. So let's invest in ourselves and not give it away to the utilities, I guess is my point here. And why that's important, and we show the average global temperature is going up. What it says, 5 of the, since the start of the 21st century, the annual global temperatures recorded have been broken 5 times. So that's not good news for the planet. And on the other side is what it costs us. And we can see the price increases from 2013 to 23. And those numbers have been lowered in the last couple of years, kind of artificially. But the previous 5 years to was a 29.1 increase. So looking at 63% over the last 15 years. And if we hadn't done what we have done to lower consumption, that would have been a $1 million hit over a 10-year period to Oak Bay. So, and the other thing to be aware of, I guess, and in my opinion, to be concerned about is that according to the Auditor General, BC Hydro has like $5.5 billion in deferral accounts. So they've been buying on Visa or on credit for a while, and those are going to have to be paid back along with dams and other things. So be prepared to see it go up. Right now, I think it's politically being held back. We got to pay for that somewhere, or our children do. So,
Mr. Olson,
now, with all that being
Mr.
said,
Olson,
we need a plan for the future, and this is what we've been working on. This is our strategic energy management plan. It's kind of the backbone of the project. It shows us all we've done, what we're planning to do. This all needs to be updated. And what we need to do first is we need to start with another energy study. That'll point out all those jobs that we need to do to keep lowering our consumption in these areas. And from that slide earlier on, you could see that we thought we'd done so much, and yet we had another energy study, new technologies, and suddenly we had a lot of different projects to do that got us another 37% more just in electricity alone. So optimistic. This is just a quick look at the kind of things that would come from an energy study. This is from 2018, but it gives us how many greenhouse gases we're going to save, kilowatt hours, gigajoules, the money we save, the payback, and the cost. And the best thing is the incentive down here at the bottom, that is 6.68 from Enercan. I appreciate that. That's really helped us save our greenhouse gases here. And once we have a new energy study, we can prioritize our tax and look for incentives and grants. So that's one of the things we need to go. Our milestones. 2013 Oak Bay Rec Center had reduced its overall energy consumption, both electrical, natural gas, and propane, by more than 50% over its historical levels. So that was a huge achievement. And then in 2016, we became carbon neutral, and we've stayed that way ever since, one of just 50 of the municipalities in BC. 2017, District of Oak Bay hit the 50% reduction mark in their electrical consumption. That's over the historical period, probably since from the 90s-ish. And then in 2019, we did a 50% reduction in natural gas, and that's only from 2008 on, because I didn't have full information on what happened before that, but that's a great mark. And then, of course, in 2019, we reached and surpassed our goal of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 33%. So, anyhow, good move. Projects for the future. solar PV for the rec center. This is something that I would love to see. That little bump that we saw in our electrical consumption in 2019 from our new innovations in our energy recovery loop bumped us up. I'd like to see that go the other way, and then have some capacity for when the electrical vehicles come on and we start having to charge more vehicles for our fleet, et cetera, in there. So new energy studies needed, and from that I can then develop a new SEMP, which will have projects, a list of things we can tackle and find some incentives for. Heat pumps for Monterey, new technologies, and low carbon electrification. That's a buzzword from BC Hydro, and they've been talking that for quite a while now, but I noticed that they're starting to advertise it more, and they're just trying to get us to give up natural gas and get on heat pumps and other technologies that are really more efficient in the long run. So things we need to remember. Every one of these projects has improved the quality of lighting, helped improve existing infrastructure, and reduced maintenance. The more we do now, the more we reduce our exposure to increases in the future. So that's a big one. Carbon taxes rose. So it went up another $5 this year. It goes up another $5 to 50 tons in 2022. Now, we got that through the CARET program in doing all that work for it, but that's now been shelved, and we did get it back for this year. We got all our carbon tax, but I don't know if that's going to be the same in the future or not. So I'm not sure there. And we have to make, energy conservation business as usual. This is my mantra. I just want to make sure that we don't lose our momentum on this, because we've done such a good job so far. And then can we do more to help the community and with sustainability? Also, what will our future goals be? And will we make sure that we have the resources to achieve them? So that's one of the things looking forward. And I want to just do a big thank you to BC Hydro, Enercan, and Fortis for their help with incentives over the years and grants. But I'd also like to particularly thank Angela Massey and Simon Vickers from BC Hydro for encouraging me to step up and become an energy manager, and Lorna Curtis for helping to make it all possible. It was a real gift to finally have the time and the tools to be able to track our results from all these energy projects over the years. We always knew we were doing the right thing, but we didn't have time or chance to keep score. So you've just seen the results of what's been a very impressive, I think, conservation job, and I'm just hoping that it goes a long way to instilling in all of us why energy conservation is important. So with that, I want to congratulate Okabe on achieving their climate action goals, and just a little remark that maybe it's time to think about what our goals are for the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. And I'm going to go to questions from council. I have Councillor Patterson and then Nay.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Olson, for that presentation. Your enthusiasm for conservation is certainly inspiring, and I think we would not have achieved nearly as much in the district without your guidance and leadership and inspiration, leading everybody and the district staff. So I congratulate you for that, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
The one, you spoke about the needing a new energy study. I'm wondering if what the date of the last energy study that was actually completed was for the district?
Mr. Olson?
We did a full energy study in, I believe it was 2009 or 9, I think it was. And then we did a quick walkthrough study in 2012 just to pick up sort of where we had, what we had done and what needs to be picked up. So yeah, we've picked off most of the major stuff from that. There's a few odds and sods that for different reasons got left at this time, but yeah, They'll
Thank
give
you,
us
Mr.
the
Olson.
roadmap to the future, I think.
Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you for that information. So the last relevant studies we have are getting a decade old now. Most of the savings do seem to have been occurring through recreational facilities, which are, of course, considered a little differently. Certainly they attribute to emission savings, but nevertheless they are recreational facilities rather than commercial facilities for businesses or residential. So I'm wondering if you could share with us your thoughts on what you would like to see for this district in a new energy study, if that was to be undertaken, and what that might look like for council to consider.
Thank you, Councillor
Well,
Patterson. If you can answer that, Mr. Olson.
Sorry, a new energy study would give us all sorts of new tasks, and that would be energy saving, but mostly corporate. That would be what we could do in our operations to make things better, and it would be a list of recommendations, lighting, mechanical, etc. But it would not go into what we could do for the community. That might be something left. I'm not sure who the best person to talk to about that is. I know I've heard of some very creative things that people have done or municipalities have done to sort of incentivize people to do the right thing at home. So.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. And next question I think probably is for you, Mayor, but since Bill C-12 was adopted by the federal government, I'm just wondering, I know the CRD has also been considering regionally the impact of that. I'm wondering if you would like to share a couple of comments on any discussions that are taking place at the CRD regionally on this.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. In fact, I was going to give that in the next section as we talk about our things, but happy to do it here. There's the CRD board did adopt a new climate action strategy. It is quite aspirational, I will say, but corporately looking at a 45% reduction in their corporate emissions by 2030, so within the next 8.5 years, or 8 and a bit years, and net zero by 2050 for corporate, and trying to get the regional greenhouse gas emissions overall down 61% by 2030 and net zero by 2050. So as you can imagine, trying to influence private buildings and so forth as well, and transportation being a big part of that. So there's a long way to go, obviously, but those are the goals that are being set regionally.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I have next Councillor Ney, then Braithwaite, then Zelka.
Thank you very much. Mr. Olson, thank you really very much for your, you've really championed this piece of work over the last number of years, decade, I guess, plus, and with very meaningful impact too. So it's very impressive what you've done here. I have to say, my questions are kind of building on, related to Councillor Patterson, but I have to say I'm really not sure why the province abandoned the CARROT program, but particularly because they it was a nice incentive, but maybe we've sort of got our own internal incentive here, and as we've already noted, we've got C-12 now in play, and that will all come about. So I have two questions really. The first one is if there is a kind of assessment done, and then you find the areas we should focus our efforts on, how do you see going about getting grants to pay for that, or would you imagine that's something that we would take on the full cost of? How would that get orchestrated, Mr. Olson?
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Mr. Olson?
Well, quite often when you do these energy studies, the companies that do them are aware of funding opportunities that is quite helpful. Other ones, we might get ready, get the project ready and sit there with a shovel-ready job for when grants do come available. Other ones, it's just so obvious that we just need to jump on them because the savings are too good. When you can get ones, I showed that slide and it showed the energy loop, which had a long payback, but thankfully we got a grant on that. But there were some other items, and some had really short payback, some had long. And when you do it as a big project, quite often you can bring along some ones that we like to do that aren't the shortest payback, but it's really will enhance our operations in other ways, and the savings are wonderful too. So lots of different scenarios. Once we have them in front, then that gives us an opportunity to decide what is the best way to take them all on, and do we want to do them in 1 year or 7 years or 10 years? It's really, we need to know what we're going to do first, and then we can figure out how we can go and make it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Go ahead, Councillor.
Just one other quick question is, I noticed that you brought up the issue of carbon emissions with residential. You had a chart there that had a column for the corporate emissions versus residential, and you noted that we really haven't been sort of tracking that, I suppose, we haven't put a lot of effort into it, according to what I thought you said. But my question really has to do with us not tracking that and not having any measures. And my question is prompted by a citizen who asked me, they noted that in our OCP we said we'd reduce our carbon emissions by, I think it was 30% by 2020. And if we're just talking residential, I guess I'm wondering, are we tracking that anywhere? I mean, I do see we've got some really good data for our corporate agenda, but for residential, have you got any comments about the metrics we're using to track residential non-corporate emissions?
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Mr. Olson?
Yeah, I wish I had better news on that. There was a site, which I can't remember the name of, but it was part of the CARE information, and it had, I think it was 2012 or 14 levels of how many electric cars there were in Oak Bay. Well, it had all the municipalities, and I don't know. I looked at it and marveled at how they may have gotten this information, but they failed to update it on a regular basis, because I was hoping to use some of that information somewhere along the line for one of my presentations or one of the projects I was working on, and they didn't continue with that. So I'm unfortunately not helpful in that. I know that in municipalities that want to claim that they've lowered their greenhouse gases for their constituencies will usually do a project where they've done something, offered incentives, and they can claim that they saved X amount based on, they knew that they incentivized 25 homeowners to change to a heat pump, and they can quantify kind of how much that should have saved, but that's kind of reverse math. I don't know how you start off. That's way over my head, I think. So.
Thank you, Mr. Olson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. I will point out it's still early stages under the fourth pillar, I think it's fourth, of the CRD plan related to buildings. They do have data management as a piece for a region, recognizing there is a significant gap in knowledge of how that breaks down. But I don't have timelines or anything for that. That was just a recent board direction, so we'll see where that goes. I have now in our speaking order, Councillor Braithwaite, then Zelka, then Green.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And just to reiterate, Mr. Olson, I would say also that it has been great to hear all of your reports over the years. We're very, very fortunate to have somebody like you who champions this for us. And I hope that if you are ever thinking of retiring, that we do have somebody coming up behind you that would be able to do all of this work as well. So hopefully there's somebody in the wings that would be ready to take over. I would probably say that you are worth your weight in greenhouse gas emission savings. So there you go. Two questions. actually one question right now. How does this, how do we stack up to other municipalities that are around us? Like how do we look in regards to what they're doing?
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I don't know if you can answer that, Mr. Olson, but if you can.
Well, I can tell you that being part of the energy managers with BC Hydro, I sat in rooms with a lot of other energy managers for other municipalities, and we were quite a bit ahead of a lot of municipalities in a lot of ways. And also when I was in my involvement with the recreation facilities operators and other recreation operators, they were quite far behind the ball in all of this. So from what I've seen, I think we're ahead on our corporate side, probably a little behind some areas. Some municipalities have done a great job of selling their plan and not a very good job of really getting the numbers down. And there's lots of things to go on there. We're a small municipality. When I looked on that list of the 50 communities that had achieved their carbon neutrality, the smaller municipalities that wanted to give it an effort had an easier time of it than some of the larger ones. Probably less complicated. So I will defend him in that way. So sorry, I don't have a definitive answer.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you so much. You did say that, and I think Councillor Ney may have touched on this, but that, we've done so well corporately, but perhaps not so much as far as the residents go. So what would be the next step if we wanted to push this more so onto the residents? What would be really a good next step for us?
Mr. Olson?
I would suggest finding out what some other municipalities have done. I know years ago I was at, I think for BC Hydro, and one of the areas they had, for instance, decided that they were going to forgive or allow a certain percent extra on building lot coverage if they included heat pumps and other energy efficiencies that they were trying to promote. And that was just a little trade-off where the person building the building gets a little something out of it as well. But that's just one item. I know some of the other municipalities have quite a list of things they're trying to do, and I would suggest some of them aren't going to work for us. Some of them we can't afford, but some of them might be very something that we could just work into. But I think reaching out to other municipalities would be the best start on that.
Thank you. And my last comment is you mentioned $675,000 in savings. And I think that it's really important for us to realize that if we had to spend that money, that would have been like a 3% increase in taxes. So it's really important that people realize how much that really does mean to the municipality. And I want to thank you again for all your work.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. And I think to your question, there was a climate action working group chaired by Councillor Appleton that brought forward some of these options and that we're busy trying to implement on some of those things to help the community bring those changes forward as well. I have next Councillor Zelka, then Green, and then Appleton.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you so much for this incredible presentation. So far, this meeting is full of just incredible good news, and what incredible work you've done over the many years. I see an article from Oak Bay News about 2014, which described you as Oak Bay's energy manager. Your LinkedIn profile, however, calls you an energy consultant. Does that mean you're retired? I just wanted to. I'm leading up to are you with us for the next 10, 20 years or what?
Well, I don't think no way we can promise, but Mr. Olson, you can give us your current status here.
Well, right now I'm doing this as a consultant, and I guess my dream would be for Oak Bay to find someone that's passionate about this, that I can pass all this information on and not lose. I would hate to step away and then have a big gap in information, and then in 5 years someone comes along and has to try reboot this with all these missing pieces. I really want to see Hope Bay stay on track. This is my passion for many years, and I don't want to see them slip behind. So I'm doing what I can to keep us going, but I'm just not as involved as what I once was. I'm doing what I can from home when it's needed, and I'm happy to keep doing that for a while, but it won't go on indefinitely. I would
Of course not.
Yeah.
But I again, absolutely incredible thanks, and this needs to be celebrated. I mean, I appreciated your last slide showing some balloons and congratulations. And I know on our letterhead, and I know on the home page we have the Carop Award about being energy neutral, GHG neutral, which is excellent. But I'm amazed how many people don't know about the incredible work we've already done. And I certainly do hope that this will tie in somehow with the Community Climate Action Working Group as it hopefully picks up with some further work going forward. Would be as part of my desires as one way of seeing this initiative move forward. I, however, have a question through the chair to probably the CAO. Which is who owns this initiative? Let me just start there.
Thank you, Councillor Zalka. But by this initiative, what are you referring to exactly? The
SEA, it's called the SEMP, and also the potential work on the new energy study.
Sure, thank you. Ms. Rella, what department would that come into, or are you able to answer that question?
I believe this originated with the Parks, Rec and Culture Department. Director Herman is on the line and can correct me if I'm wrong. And again, this can be an item that's referred to strategic planning if council wants further work done, which is coming up this November.
Thank you, Ms. Rella. Go ahead, Councillor Zalka.
Yes, thank you. That actually ties in nicely with my second question, which may lead to a brief motion. How can we bring this to priorities and planning with respect to the new energy study that is apparently needed to provide a map, a strategic plan moving forward, most likely based on the existing work of the SEMP 2019 report, which is up on the okbay.ca website for anyone who didn't quite get that?
Sure.
I guess that question would be through you, Chair, most likely to the CAO.
Sure, thank you, Councillor Zalka. Ms. Rella, you may answer. I can probably follow up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff have invited council input on any initiatives that we've been keeping track of through the year that haven't hit the books. So we did send out a draft list to council. This can be added to that draft list simply by an email, Councillor Zalka. Thank you.
Fantastic. If the mayor will indulge after receipt of the report, I would certainly work with whoever wants on council to put forward a motion to bring this to priorities and planning to see how we can continue this incredibly important work moving forward.
Councillor Zalka, just for clarification, you don't need to make a motion on that. You can just send an email, as Ms. Rella said, just directly to her with this, and we'll bring it. We'll have it up at the strategic planning.
To priorities and planning?
Yeah, that's all we need.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I will do that. Final question is probably to Mr. Olson. Now, with respect to helping the community move forward on these aspects, I noticed that the BC government and some of the other local authorities do have financial incentives to help with these energy upgrades of their own homes. BetterLivingBC.ca as part of the Clean BC program at the provincial level. I saw that, I guess, as part of not only the incentive for greenhouse gas, but also as a way of getting the economy moving again, that sometimes those rebates are doubled. And I quickly applied. Most likely, lots of other people did apply as well. But I ran into an issue, and I'm wondering if maybe you can comment on this as an energy consultant, since this will most likely be a problem that other members of the community will encounter. Bringing, for example, one of the items I wanted to upgrade, which I finally did, was to take my hot water tank, which was natural gas, and convert it to a built-in heat pump hybrid hot water tank. It's not a separate heat pump sitting outside, it's a heat pump sitting on top of the unit. So it looks like a very tall hot water tank. And I couldn't find a plumber anywhere who would touch it with a 10-foot pole. They kept saying, oh, new technology, oh, it's not going to work. So I had to actually buy it myself and then find someone to basically just do the installation. And now both my gas and my electric bill are down. It's amazing. But for that problem of trying to find a plumber or a service technician who's willing to deal with this new technology, do you have any advice, please?
Councillors, I'm going to rule that just out of order. We have an energy consultant here, not to. I don't think we can get into that level of detail for Mr. Olson at this meeting. I'm sorry.
Oh, and that will be fine. It's not ready for me. I'm done. I've got it installed.
I understand.
I got the rebate, but this would be for the members of the public, not for me.
Understood. Anything else for Mr. Olson?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. We move on to Councillor Green and then Appleton.
I'll be brief. Thank you, Mayor. And Mr. Olson, I'm sorry, there's sort of an echo. Is that bothering? Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Olson, my voice is echoing, but I just want...
Maybe turn the volume down on the microphone. It might just be a little on the speaker. Is that might just be a bit of a feedback. Okay, we'll try that.
Feedback, yeah. Mr. Olson, thank you very much for a great presentation, as always, and for all the wonderful work you've done. I'm hoping the presentation, and I would, through the mayor, ask staff, can this be placed on the website, Mr. Olson's presentation? I think that they are impressive numbers, and this is the kind of quiet work that a lot of people don't know is going on in Oak Bay, so it would be really nice to blow Mr. Olson's horn, or Oak Bay's horn, by making this available on the website for the public to access. Further, you did say something that resonated with me, and that is about the future. So it appears we need to develop a succession plan to replace you eventually, and thank you for being honest about that. And secondly, you said that you were very concerned about the future, and you hope this work will not only continue, but expand in Oak Bay. So I'm hoping that you will stay long enough to help guide the municipality in expanding, and then perhaps giving us some ideas and guidance about how we can incentivize our community as well further on these important issues. So thanks again.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I think we can certainly get the presentation up, because it should be ultimately it's now completed and available for the agenda. But perhaps we can also just look at some more sort of information sharing through the website as well. I have Councillor Appleton next. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Olson. My thanks as well, Mr. Olson, for your presentation. I always enjoy your material and your approach to this work. I was just wondering, clearly, when we go to facilities operations and buildings that the district operates, clearly we spend a lot of time and energy talking about the rec center, obviously, because that's where the bulk of the emissions come from. Just wondering whether you could comment on sort of the level of detail and the level of information that we have about the energy efficiency of some of the other older municipal buildings.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Mr. Olson?
Well, we have a lot of older buildings in the municipality, and that's something that I guess if we do an energy study, we can decide how in depth and if we want to look at all the buildings, which I would think would be a great idea. Yeah, new technologies come along and there's better ways to do things. So I'm not sure what else to say on that. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I guess it's fair to say that without the revised energy plan, we don't have a very good read on where the energy efficiencies would be had in terms of the other buildings beyond the rec center. Do I have that right?
Mr.
No, we have we had the heat pumps for Monterey Center. Well, that's a great project. It's been staring us in the face for a while, but unfortunately the electrical panel over there is so full that we can't take any more electrical on without incurring major cost to upgrade that. So finding a way around that is kind of a little above me. We have heating systems in the public works garage area that needs replacing, that they are looking into right now. They're looking into it on their side of things. I would love to see professionals step in and make a recommendation for things like that. And every building's got something that needs to be updated in it, to be honest. And if we can do them under an energy study, and if we can do them, with energy savings or maybe even incentives, it keeps some of this stuff from getting on the capital list, and it leaves us money, to work from for other things that are important in municipalities. So, anyways.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. I think it's probably worthwhile for the public to know as well that there is a facilities manager position that we are seeking to fill, and a lot of this work in terms of those detailed plans are through that role that we have not yet found the person for yet. So we'll get there hopefully sooner rather than later. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Well, thank you, Worship. And I just would take the opportunity to thank you to Mr. Olson. I guess I would take the opportunity to make a couple of comments about some of the things that have been raised. Firstly, that I think that it's important that, both Mr. Olson and some of my colleagues have brought up the issue of transition and resourcing to deal with these types of topics. I guess I would also remind council that that was not a recommendation from the Community Climate Action Working Group, but it was information or a topic that was raised by them for future consideration from council, was the provision of staffing and resources to deal with climate action initiatives and climate action projects. So I would be remiss if I didn't point out that the Climate Action Work Group did specifically mention that item. So something that I hope that council will consider in the near term is providing those resources for that. And I do also appreciate the discussion, and again, we'll take the opportunity to remind council, I do appreciate the discussion around community emissions and community climate action. I think one of the big reasons, to my mind, why the Community Climate Action Work Group was formed up and those recommendations were sought was because the district and our corporate emissions were going in the right direction, but the community emissions were not. We could not say the same thing about community emissions as we do about corporate emissions in Mr. Olson's material here. So just a reminder that those two biggest emission categories are transportation and housing, and those were the two big topics that the Climate Action Work Group wrangled with, and those factor into a bunch of decision making that council will consider in the upcoming strategic planning sessions. So, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. I don't have any questions for you, Mr. Olson. I think they've all been covered by members of council. I will invite any members of the public who wishes to speak at this time, and then we'll get to the motion we can take the motion to receive and then have public input. Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, opposed, unopposed. Is this still live, just in case there's anybody from the public that wishes to speak? Perhaps as we're waiting, I will just say a few words, not questions, just comments. I'll reiterate what you've heard from every member of council, which is our share the appreciation on behalf of council, but really of the public as a whole. I think people seeing those cost savings and the energy efficiency and the reduction of greenhouse gases over this time, and that very consistent steady state decline that's happened quite remarkably over the years is in so many ways part and parcel of the work that you've undertaken, working with staff, helping build the culture that we have now of people looking for those opportunities internally. And so you have been a great evangelist and an advocate over the years, Mr. Olson, so I just want to say thank you very much for that.
You're welcome, Your Worship.
Is there anybody from the public who wishes to speak? Ms. Williams?
Thank you, Your Worship. There's one member of the public who has joined the meeting but has not indicated that they wish to speak. And the phone number ends in the last four numbers 9907. If that individual is interested in speaking, *9, and you can raise your hand.
Great, thank you very much. So if there is a *9 and that hand is raised, then we'll go to you. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Okay, I will move on to the next item on the agenda then. Again, thank you very much, Mr. Olson, and enjoy your evening.
You're very welcome.
Up next on the agenda is Mayor and Council verbal reports. I was forced to throw away my great news about the climate from the CRD. So I won't speak to that. I will go around the table here. This is just an opportunity for councillors to bring other members of council, but also the public up to speed on anything that they're engaged with in outside bodies or committees. So be as lengthy or as brief as you see fit, but we'll just go around the table here if that's all right. It might just start with you, Councillor Ney, if you're able to.
No, I sent a note around to council regarding the Rising Economy Week conference that's coming up on November 22 to 25. There's some great speakers. If you can register, there's an online component to the conference, so pretty easy to register in there. And I did also bring attention to the council that they've got a new board, and there's a lot of energy and excitement about the work that they're intending to do, including some trying to get the Indigenous Prosperity Centre up and going. And and I also attended the Orange Shirt Day event up at the high school at Sonowayeth, that the community association and some of the members of the churches organized, which was, I thought, a very good event and well attended. And I hope in future, actually, the district can work a bit more closely with the community to do some to celebrate that day in a meaningful way. I think it's the community has clearly demonstrated that that's something that they want to have done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. And I will say they did reach out and I provided some assistance for them in that organizing as well. And I know that this whole table supports the efforts for reconciliation around the region. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mayor, and perhaps I might just add that we are speaking in regards to hoping to hold a regional event in Oak Bay next year for that Truth and Reconciliation Day. And something will be coming to council, I think, soon in regards to that. So as far as Uvic Liaison goes, I do get to have a tour of the Student Housing and Dining Project site tour this week, which I'm really looking forward to that. As for SD61, I'm working with the group around fundraising for the Jack Wallace track, which they're trying to get in prior to the Francophone Games. Touch wood on that one. So that's ongoing. Royal and McPherson Theatre Society, the new board is in place, and we're looking at funding streams for capital replacement for the Royal in particular. And the Okabe Arts Advisory Committee, we have a meeting this week, so I'll report on that after this meeting this week.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you. I attended the Tourism Committee meeting, and as you know, the Oak Bay Beach Hotel has been named the #1 hotel in Canada, and I believe number 10 in the world, among the number 10 in the world. So if you have a chance, you must visit the hotel and stay overnight. I certainly plan to try and do that at some point. And so that really is an exciting piece of news. Tourism is still, I think, a difficult challenge for everybody. Sorry, this microphone has got a problem, but I'll try not to speak too closely. Tourism is still struggling and still having challenges. We know the cruise ships are not coming into Victoria at the moment. It looks unlikely it will be anytime in the near future, but I have to say this group remains really upbeat and cheerful despite the hardships that this inclement has created for them. I also attended the CRD Arts Committee. They are also an active group. I think they were trying to get some more commitment from the board, CRD board, on the funding model. So as we know, not all municipalities contribute to the CRD Arts Committee. Oak Bay does proudly, but unfortunately not all municipalities do. And so there's always this tension between a regional service and a local service. So the arts remains a challenge also because of pandemic, certainly. and funding challenges. But again, a group that are very committed. And that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I'm going to go to Councillor Zelka, then Appleton, then Patterson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to report out, if I may, on the Regional Water Supply Commission, an initiative that I had the pleasure of seconding, is moving forward with respect to providing grants to local businesses and also potentially local authorities to replace their what's called once-through cooling equipment machines. Right now, there are a number of larger companies and also maybe a lot of larger, I don't know, Thrifties, Save on Foods, those sort of very large places that we all go to. In the summertime, they're rather cool, but many of them are being cooled by potable water, where the water basically just gets run through a unit called a once-through cooler, and then gets wasted essentially after the cooling is done. So most other places around the world have replaced these, and Victoria is a little behind the eight ball. So it looks like the Commission will be moving forward with an incentive to assist companies and potentially local authorities to move off of these cheap units that provide cheap air conditioning based on potable water usage. So we'll see how that goes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zelka. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Provided an update on Greater Victoria Public Library Board. The most recent meeting of the board was on September the 28th. As usual, a pretty massive amount of work being undertaken by staff and much work being done in wake of COVID by the group. So just always amazing to see the list of things that are underway. The strategic bridging plan, which I've informed council about before, is sort of a 2-year strategic plan that bridges out of the COVID era for the public library, is sort of preparing for its formal launch this month. Will appear on the website and will sort of go public, as it were. The information's been available, but it's sort of being launched in a more directed way. That pairs up with an initiative that the library board does, or the library does on a regular basis, which is a perception survey. So reaching out to the public and reaching out to folks who use the library and finding out what they like, what are the most important features for them, and it helps optimize the service of the library. So constantly looking for opportunities to optimize the services of the library. There has recently, I've informed council about a recent outreach to our own staff in Oak Bay about the service delivery plan and what that might mean for municipal operations, specifically about the Oak Bay branch, which, as I've mentioned, is sort of in the delivery plan as up for replacement within the next 10 years. So I understand there's been some very constructive and very helpful discussions already between GVPL staff, operations staff, and our own staff about what that might entail, and council may see some initial discussions about that come into the next this year's strategic planning process, at least in an initial way to start talking about that. There is still service restoration plan implementation going on at all the branches. Almost all of the services that were suspended during COVID are back up and running, but you're sort of seeing a build back better type of approach being taken in a lot of branches where things are coming back but are actually better, more usable, and more efficient than they were before. So if you haven't been into a library branch other than our own library branch lately, I'd encourage you to do so, because there's some interesting adaptations going on all the time. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out the significant efforts and the significant time and visibility that's being afforded to Indigenous reconciliation through GVPL's operations and through GVPL's outreach materials. There's significant time and effort and thought being put into that. And I think that you'll see that reflected in most aspects of GVPL operations right now. And then just very briefly, Your Worship, I'll give Council an update on the Heritage Foundation, the Oak Bay Heritage Foundation, which has met a couple of times since our last update. Again, a very active group. I think Council is well aware of how hard the Heritage Foundation works. A very significant portion of the discussion around the foundation table of late has been also on the reconciliation side of things. Recently, the foundation did put their support behind the Reconciliation Oak Bay group, which contributes to their efforts. And there's significant work being done with folks up at Uvic to look at engagement opportunities. And I find it very refreshing to be a part of. There's a lot of energy there and a lot of interest. And frankly, I would be remiss if I didn't say that they were looking to the council table for council to definitely follow up on our indication to pursue these initiatives. So I would say that they are definitely looking towards this table to see us do those things, which I've heard support for around the council table. So I appreciate that. And I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that the foundation AGM is next month, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I will just report that as the liaison for Oak Bay to Crest, Crest did in late September make application, which went to a meeting of the Langford Council, made application for potential installation of a 35-meter monopole installation relative to potential land acquisition. But it was Crest, as is usual. Our position is that we will always be prepared to go to public hearing. The District of Langford doesn't require any services that are related to safety within the district to go to public hearings. So it was approved by council, and I simply present it because it was a meeting that was available to the public. So just to update our council also, and I might just add that the proposed placement of the monopole, the site was already cleared when we undertook consideration of it, so it wasn't that Crest was asking for removal of the tree canopy in that area. So that's just an update, and I'll be bringing probably further information down the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson, and all the councillors. I appreciate these updates. It's always interesting to hear all the work that's going on, but I also know from talking to all of you that there's so much more going on and all these things that that you get a little glimpse here, but the amount of work that gets put in by all of you is quite incredible. I've already spoken on the CRD about the climate action piece, so I won't reiterate that. I think I'll just touch on the points Councillor Green made about the CRD Arts, because there's two aspects. Two motions came forward looking at expanding the arts to be a regional service, and what that means essentially is that it would become a regional service, truly not an opt-in, opt-out model that is currently in place. Currently, I'm not sure at the numbers, it's probably half of the municipal agencies participate and about half don't, maybe somewhere in that neighborhood.
I think it's about nine
9
do.
to 13, okay. So it was the question was, do we just incorporate all of those? So there was pushback from some, and there's sort of a willingness to go out and do some more advocacy work. So that's the direction of the board at this time. And the second part was the regional theatre piece, which was a much more substantial look. Currently, the Royal Theatre is owned by us, Salish and Victoria, and the McPherson is owned by Victoria, and the two of them are essentially managed through the CRD. But there isn't a model really to look at the regional needs in terms of theatres, and so there was a lot of work that's gone in to look at some models that would allow for a more regional approach to theatres. Again, there was complete agreement that was a good approach, but a lot of the non-participating members balked at being forced into it. So it's going back to committee to look at some ways of possibly bringing that forward. So we're not there yet, but those are two options, things that are being dealt with at the table that are, I think, quite resonant with Oak Bay, because we are so engaged in all those arts pieces, both the fine arts and the theatre performing arts pieces. And last but not least, I'll say that I chair the governance committee, which for the CRD, and so we're going through a number of issues there around all kinds of things related to governance and practices. And it's been quite interesting about how many things that we're trying to get to in terms of best practices have been undertaken at this table over the last 3 years in terms of trying to improve clarity so the public can see things, to get information out in a timely fashion, those sorts of aspects. So it's express my appreciation to staff for their efforts to get our ship in order, because it's been very helpful at that table as well. So with that, I'm happy to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item number. Oh, sorry, I'll sit back from the microphone. That probably helps a bit with the echo, does it? Not too much? Okay. So the main item on the agenda, last item on the agenda tonight is item number 7.1. We have Mr. Wong here that's going to be presenting. So as all of the council knows, and I'm sure most of the public are aware, we've at the end of the last council term, they approved this moving forward with secondary suites. This body has tried to move that forward in a way that gives us something meaningful. We can bring tangible options. And so this is essentially the presentation of all the findings to date. We're not making decisions tonight, but it's a chance to ask the consultant on questions and information. And we'll come back to this table to give some direction as a council in the future meeting. So with that, I'm going to welcome Ms. Vrella. Did you want to say anything, or should I just introduce Mr. Wong? Okay, I'll just introduce Mr. Wong, who has been the consultant engaged on this from the beginning, but we also have Ms. McDougall as well available from staff to speak to things if necessary. Ms. Vrella?
Your Worship, I do believe Caitlin has a quick intro.
Oh, perfect. So why don't I do that? I will introduce Ms. McDougall, our planner, who can introduce Mr. Wong to provide the presentation. The presentation is a little hard to find, but if you're at home and you're looking for it, it is in the agenda package. It's actually listed as an attachment within there, but you have to scroll through 104. On page 104 of the agenda package, the presentation can be found. So just to give that clarity, because if you're sitting at home, you may not be able to see the slides otherwise. So with that, Ms. McDougall, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. You actually did a wonderful job of summarizing my very brief overview presentation, but I'll just quickly go over a few things here to reiterate. So before you this evening is the secondary suite study, final strategy document, which concludes the fifth and final phase of the secondary suite study that was initiated in 2018. Now, the secondary suite study final strategy provides possible direction on a series of attributes that could be used for regulating secondary suites, including a variety of things such as zoning, parking, licensing, building code, infrastructure and servicing, and as well as staff resourcing. And as you mentioned, Your Worship, we are joined by Dan Huang from Urban Systems, who will be providing information about this final strategy document, including background information and an overview of the considerations required for permitting secondary suites within single-family homes in Oak Bay. And then moving forward, the implementation of the secondary suite study would require additional discussion and direction from Council. Council's future decision-making will involve considering guiding attributes that would provide that broad regulatory framework for the secondary suites program in Oak Bay, along with subsequent direction to staff to prepare draft regulations and policy documentations at a future date. So for now, I will ask to pass it over to Dan for his presentation overview.
Thank you very much, Ms. McDougall. Welcome, Mr. Wong.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of the committee. I'll do a quick sound check, and then I'll share my screen as well, too. And
we can hear you just fine, and welcome.
Great, thanks very much. Again, thank you very much again for the opportunity to present to Council our work on the secondary suite study. And thanks to Ms. McDougall for that introduction. There'll be a number of slides in the presentation. As you mentioned, Your Worship, that is in the agenda package. Many of the slides Council and the community have seen, but a few final slides with respect to a framework for consideration at a future date by Council. So you've probably seen this background slide about 5 times in the past. This is based upon some policy direction that the District of Oak Bay instilled in the 2014 Official Community Plan, which acknowledged to develop a policy and regulatory framework to permit secondary suites as a way of providing affordable housing. As Ms. McDougall mentioned, we were selected to assist the district in a 5-phase project for secondary suites beginning in late 2018. And the first round of community consultation occurred in spring of 2019, back when we could have a physical open house at the Oak Bay Rec Center. We conducted some background research and analysis through the fall of 2019. Into 2020, we compiled a secondary suites draft strategy, which was presented to council in early 2021. We engaged in a second round of community consultation through the spring of this year, and those results were summarized in a report presented in June of 2021 to both APC and council. And this secondary suites framework was then finalized and presented to APC last month in September. So as per the previous presentations for members of the public, secondary suites has a series of regulatory spectrums based on a number of different attributes. That includes the type of the suite, land use, lot size, unit size, owner occupancy, dwelling use, parking, enforcement, compliance with the building code, and registration. And the spectrum varies from relatively simple spectrum all the way to more stringent regulation. Through our work, we identified a series of program scenarios for potential district-wide secondary suites. These scenarios, again, were based on scenarios that became more stringent from scenario A through scenario D. These weren't necessarily options for the community to choose, but they just provided a series of placeholders with respect to different regulations, which we were looking for the community's comment. From that, as part of the outreach in the summer of this year, we are here tonight to present a framework for consideration to get feedback from council, and then we'll come back at some point in the future for council's consideration of that regulatory framework. And this is based on all of the background research over the last couple of years, the analysis in the reporting, and the feedback to date from the 2 community open houses, as well as previous feedback from EBC and council. The framework aims to address and balance the main issues that were identified in the community and members of APC and council. It provides regulatory certainty, but it also incorporates some flexibility in the process with the goal of encouraging the legalization and regulation of both existing as well as potentially new secondaries. So in order to move forward potentially with secondary suite regulations, there would be some potential text amendments required to Oak Bay zoning bylaw number 3531. There would need to be a new definition for secondary suites added into the zoning bylaw. With respect to where secondary suites would be applicable, based on our research and work to date and council's feedback, the framework would consider permitting suites as an accessory use in any zone that permits a single detached dwelling for all existing and new development. With respect to lot size, there would be no minimum lot size requirement because we feel that the site coverage that's covered in each of the different zones should address the building footprint, as the secondary suites being proposed would be constructed within the primary building footprint. With respect to unit size, the framework for consideration would have no maximum unit size, but we would look to a maximum of 40% of the gross floor area of the single detached dwelling to ensure that it remains an ancillary use to the primary use, which would be the single detached dwelling. Finally, a couple of other text amendments to the Oak Bay zoning bylaw. With respect to suites and borders, based on the feedback from the community and from council, the framework would consider allowing both secondary suites as well as borders within the single detached dwelling. Finally, there was a lot of discussion with respect to owner occupancy. We feel that we heard fairly clearly from the community that owner occupancy was something to be strongly considered, and therefore the framework for consideration could require in either the suite or the principal dwelling unit owner occupancy could be put into the zoning regulation. This would require further legal review for specific wording in the zoning bylaw, but there is a recent case study last year in the spring of 2020, 1120732 BC versus Whistler, in which case the Court of Appeal upheld a zoning bylaw amendment with respect to the use versus user, which is generally the legal consideration with respect to owner occupancy. I will caveat this by stating that I am not a lawyer, and as such, this would require further legal review for specific wording. But I just note the statement at the bottom where the court concluded that there was no general principle that a bylaw may not regulate users in any way. Rather, the adoption of bylaws regulating users is permitted as long as the bylaws are not unreasonably discriminatory in their effect. And so this is probably the most clear case to date with respect to the use versus user regulations in a zoning bylaw, and that has been upheld at least at the BC Court of Appeal. With respect to parking regulations, again, a lot of discussion in the community as well as at this table and at APC. Where we've landed, at least for the framework for consideration, is the requirement of one additional off-street parking space for the secondary suite. The 5 comparison communities that we looked at all required one additional space. That was Saanich, Sydney, Esquimalt, West Vancouver, and Chilliwack. Fair amount of discussion at previous council tables, noting that on a case-by-case basis, depending on the location of the unit, proximity to transit, proximity to commercial, there could be the option for an applicant to come in for a variance on that case-by-case basis to relax the parking requirements based on localized conditions. Finally, council had asked us to look at other potential parking incentives. These are seen as being quite challenging for a single detached dwelling development. Usually the parking incentives are generally provided for more infill development, such as missing middle housing. With respect to the building inspection and the building code, as noted, there have been recent changes to the BC Building Code in 2019, specific to secondary suites. These are provided as Appendix A in our final strategy report. For existing buildings, the building code does now allow for what are called alternate compliance methods under Division A. For brand new single family residential construction with a suite, full compliance with the building code would be required under Division B. Some of the examples for an existing building where a secondary suite is added are things like the consideration of reducing ceiling heights from 1.95 meters to 1.85 meters, reducing doorway openings from 1.98 meters to 1.89 meters, and reducing the height under the stairs from 1.95 meters to 1.85 meters. There are also some alternative compliance methods for fire resistant ratings and sound transmission. With respect to registration, there continued to be a mixed response between the voluntary and mandatory registration programs, as well as the requirement for business licensing. For the comparison communities, 4 of the 5 of the comparison communities did not require any licensing program at all. Only one community, West Vancouver, had a mandatory registration process, which included a $450 initial fee and an annual business license. So as part of this framework for consideration, we would suggest to start the program off, existing secondary suites could be provided a voluntary registration process with all new suites requiring mandatory registration, both at no cost. Alternatively, the district may wish to include secondary suites sometime in the future within its business license bylaw as a potential home-based business. This currently has a $50 annual fee. But our feedback, I think, to date from council, and looking forward to some of the conversation tonight, was voluntary registration, or if it was mandatory at no cost, would be a good way to start the process. But we look forward to some discussion tonight as we move forward for the framework. A couple of other slides. One is on the utility fees. Water and sewer utilities are currently levied on a metered basis, and as such, suites then are captured within the meter use. For solid waste, which includes your garbage as well as recycling and organics, all residential property owners in Okabe pay the same annual fee of $286 per unit. It's actually $286.91, so it's probably closer to $287. It could make sense for a suite to have another set of bins. However, at this time, it would not be ecologically sustainable to automatically provide those set of bins for the suite. You may have houses that may not need it. And if you did provide it, they may just fill it for the sake of filling it. However, because it is an extra unit, if the owner requested an extra set of bins due to the usage requirements, they could be provided and then charged that extra set of bins based on a cost recovery model. And again, of the comparison communities, 2 charged an extra solid waste fee, the others did not. There are a couple of other communities that do charge as well for solid waste. Finally, some other considerations. The timing of this framework is appropriate given the direction of council as it moves into 2022 budget deliberations. There may be some resource and other staffing implications depending on the framework which council directs staff to move forward on. And this would then be considered as part of its upcoming 2022 budget deliberations. And then finally, as this program starts to roll out, we would strongly recommend a comprehensive communications, information sharing component using the district's website, information flyers, as well as social media to inform and educate and communicate with the community about the secondary suites program. So with that, Your Worship, thank you very much for the many great discussions on this important topic for the District of Okabe. Looking forward to the discussion tonight, as well as moving forward on the implementation of secondary suites within the district. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wong. You occasionally, I think, as you lean back away from your microphone, fade a little bit. So as we take questions, perhaps just stay close to the microphone. But we were able to hear all that you said in the course of the presentation. I'll come back to this table and take questions from council. I'll then go to the public, and if anybody from the public wishes to speak, we'll take that opportunity as well. And then we'll come back to this table for comments and discussion. I will point out again that we're not making decisions tonight, but the nature of the conversation, I think, as much as we broke them down point by point last time, I think ultimately we're going to have to get to the sum of the parts, which maybe you may make compromises in one area to make it work as a whole. And I think that's part of the conversation that we can start tonight, is to sort of contemplate what the final endpoint might look like, and any other additional risks or considerations that we want to consider as we do come back to this table in future to look at this in more detail. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions of Mr. Wong. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson and then Councillor Braithwaite.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to Mr. Wong. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Wong. It's always interesting to hear the commentary that you put together. I would like to go back to one comment that came up in this presentation that I'd just like some clarity on, and that was in reference to providing an additional set of bins if a suite is added to a dwelling. And I certainly understand where it may not be necessary to have an additional set of bins, especially a full set of bins, but the statement that it will not be ecologically sustainable, I'm wondering if we could have a little more clarity on why it would not be ecologically sustainable.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Mr. Wong?
Thank you, through the chair, to Councillor Patterson. I think that comment was maybe not as geared towards the green bin or the blue bin, but not to make the automatic assumption that a new black bin was required for every user. If you didn't need it, just for my own home use, when we moved here from the Okanagan, we had a black bin that was provided on a weekly basis, and we were a little bit worried when we came here to Okabe 10 years ago that there was only going to be provided garbage pickup every 2 weeks. And quite frankly, we adjusted, and every 2 weeks our bin is actually, rarely full. And so we didn't want to make the assumption that another secondary suite should automatically be provided. That set of, especially the black bin for garbage, but at the same time, as an extra unit, we wanted to provide at least a framework to provide that bin if they really need it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wong. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Okay, thank you. So just for clarity then, we might, it might be necessary to include a reduced complement of bins for a suite then, rather than the entire set of bins. Is that what I'm hearing?
Mr. Wong?
A little hard to hear the question through the chair, but it was something about a reduced set of bins.
I think the question was just, there's a possibility here, I guess, just that we can consider in the course of this the standard provision of bins could be a subset or a reduced number of bins.
That could be a consideration, Your Worship, for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that information. Throughout the presentations, one thing that I haven't heard about, and so I'm wondering if we could perhaps have comments on, and I know that this will probably be relative to the criteria that Council decides upon, but I know there are municipalities that definitely, where they have housing programs, and that includes secondary suites in their housing strategies. There are action impact criteria established so that there is a monitoring that goes on to understand the impacts of the decisions that are made, the diversity of housing it adds to the community, so that the programs, in fact, are a continuous program of understanding what is happening both locally and regionally, and being able to adapt whatever housing strategy is decided upon. There has been no discussion on how action impact criteria are selected, or what is reasonable to in fact be evaluating and what is too difficult to perhaps determine in any way that can allow you to make decisions. I'm wondering if Mr. Huang does have any information or thoughts on that he could provide to us.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Mr. Wong, do you have anything to add on that front in terms of ongoing monitoring and assessment process?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Councillor Patterson. There's certainly, it hasn't necessarily come up in detail in this conversation, but in other studies, especially other housing studies, that is something that that has been potentially put in place. It's probably something that if the committee through council would be interested in looking at a time of implementation, we could certainly work with staff on what that set of criteria might look like. It is how you measure success, which then first council would need to think about what success looks like, what that criteria might look like, and then how you would measure that success as well. So it would take some further discussion in kind of setting that criteria out, but it is something that could be explored, and we have explored that in other communities.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
That's all the questions I have right now.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you so much. I do have a number of questions, but I'll ask a few of them and then perhaps pass the floor along to someone else just so they get a chance to ask. But I just wanted to follow up on some of the stuff that Councillor Patterson was asking about in regards to the garbage and recycling, because what I was hearing was that if there was a secondary suite, they might have to pay for the extra bins, but was there any talk at all about if they would have to pay extra solid waste fee? The amount that you said was about $286 or $287 a year. If there's a secondary suite in place in a house, would they not have to double the payment of the solid waste fee?
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Mr. Wong.
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Braithwaite. So the options with respect to solid waste, so as I mentioned, water and sewer is based on a metered rate. So if you use more, you'll pay more. For solid waste, the unit would pay $286 for the single family house. One option could be don't charge the additional $286 for the secondary suite. There are some comparison communities which don't charge that extra $286, but then don't provide the additional bins. There is the potential if you need additional garbage, you can buy a bag tag. So there is a bit of a user pay component to that. Some communities automatically charge the additional $286 additional per unit. And so one option for consideration under the framework was that the district could automatically charge an additional $286 for the secondary suite. And then the choice would then be, do you then charge that and automatically provide an extra 3 bins or not provide the extra 3 bins? And I guess if you're charging that, then it would be fair that you would actually automatically provide those 3 bins. And so I guess if there was another option would be charge the $286 and provide 3 additional bins. And I guess the hybrid model is somewhere in between. And we've seen this in some communities where they may charge a prorated rate or a 50% rate, and then may or may not provide those additional bins. And so of the comparison communities, we've seen actually all 3 different approaches. One where they don't charge any more for the secondary suite. The other end of the spectrum was they charge the full additional unit and provide you 3 more bins. And we've also actually seen some examples where they charge a prorated or a half of 50% fee and don't provide you the bins. And so we're, I guess, suggesting within the, be good to get your feedback, but we're suggesting in this framework at this time to not charge the additional fee, just to encourage that secondary suite to not pay additional funds, but allow the opportunity to that they could actually purchase those bins at the $286 per unit. So I hope that made sense.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. So a couple of questions as well. Around scenario B, C, and D, it suggests a 558 square meter or about a 6,000 square foot lot. So my lot, for example, is a 50 by 115, so that would be about 5,750 feet, square feet. And I think I'm an RS4, I think. But that would mean that my lot under scenarios B, C, and D would not be big enough to allow a suite, correct?
Mr. Wong, there's no, yeah, go ahead,
Through
Mr.
the
Wong.
chair, through the chair, that is correct. But the suggested framework for consideration is no minimum lot size for a secondary suite.
Sorry, you said it was correct, but her question was that it would not qualify. But your suggestion here is that there is no minimum, in which case it would all lots would qualify by default, essentially.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. I'm suggesting, the scenarios, the minimum lot sizes that Councillor Braithwaite identified in the scenarios were correct, but our suggested framework would have no minimum lot size requirement.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Wong. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. And then on page 37, there's a statement that says many homeowners avoid regulation because of costs and conforming. So can you remind me? I know it's in the report somewhere. I just couldn't put my finger on it tonight. Remind me of the statistics of the surrounding municipalities of, if you can, of the suites that actually came forward and registered.
Mr. Wong?
I don't have those numbers directly in front of me, Your Worship, and we didn't actually provide specific numbers in the report either. I can provide those at a later date, but unfortunately I don't have those specific numbers in front of me, so I wouldn't want to try and quote numbers from other communities at this time.
Okay. Councillor Braithwaite?
Thank you. That would probably be a little bit helpful for me anyhow. And then you were talking a little bit, and you did touch on this because I was looking in the appendix to try and figure this out, but you talked about providing some limited flexibility for secondary suites in older homes and how we should consider applying alternate compliance methods, Division A of Building Code where appropriate, and for brand new secondary suite construction, full compliance with BC Code Division B. So I understand Division B would be whatever is written in the building code right now. But for Division A, you did touch a little bit on some things. But can you please explain perhaps how many? Well, I guess you can't really tell me how many suites would fall into that Division A. Because that seems to me where we might run into an issue is with the Division A building code, because obviously we want to make sure that the suites meet all the health and safety standards that for the tenants. But I'm wondering if we have any indication on how many would fall under Division A.
Mr. Wong, do we have any sense of that? I'm thinking pretty much all existing buildings, probably pretty close, but Mr. Wong?
Through the chair, on page 84 of the agenda package is where the Division A alternate compliance methods table is located. And I would suggest, yes, anything, certainly the homes that were built in kind of the 1910s to, that first tranche of homes from the 1910s to the 1930s. It really is those basement ceilings, and then the homes that were built kind of in the 40s, the 40s or so. They probably don't have those the 8-foot ceilings for sure, but they would likely meet the 1.85 meter ceiling height requirement. And so it would be, as you said, Chair, most of the older homes may or may not comply to the new ceiling heights, certainly in the basement.
Councillor Braithwaite?
I'll ask one more question and then pass it to someone else. I understand that the illegal suites already in place feed into our infrastructure. like the sewer, etc. And so is there a way to write into policy that the municipality would reserve the right to limit the number of suites in any given area? So my reasoning behind that would be in case we get inundated with requests in certain areas, so as not to overtax the current infrastructure that we have, which might not be able to handle, say, an addition of 200 suites in a certain area.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Mr. Wong?
I'll start, Your Worship, and may defer to staff on this. If it is an as-of-right use in the zoning bylaw as identified in the framework, we would allow secondary suites within all residential zones that permitted single family, then that is an as-of-right use. And so I guess as if you found that certain neighborhoods were seeing certain impacts from that, you may have to revisit the zoning bylaw and move to a more geographic location. That was something that was identified as an option, but it wasn't one that was seen to be as acceptable. So the infrastructure components, just to touch on that, and through this discussion and work, we've been working closely with the Director of Engineering. The impact on the water and sewer system from secondary suites are relatively nominal on the grand scheme of things. From an infrastructure, water and sewer, there's the issue of capacity versus the age of the infrastructure. And from a secondary suites perspective, the impact on the capacity to support additional secondary suites, it has less of an impact on the capacity of the system versus the age of the infrastructure. For water system, there are two types of components when you're providing water service to a land use. One is the domestic flow, and then the other is the fire flow. And so the domestic flow is essentially your flow for the use, for your daily needs, and then of course fire flow is for the in case of a fire. Fire flows are significantly higher than domestic flow, and so the size of the pipe that's currently in the ground that supports the fire flow for the current residential systems within Okabe, my understanding is that those are adequate to support secondary suites within the district. As you move into significantly higher forms of land use, including multifamily, commercial, and industrial uses, that fire flow requirement increases significantly. And so that's where you start getting capacity impacts. But as far as the capacity of the current system, the current pipes in the ground can support secondary suites with nominal impacts. The bigger issue then becomes the age and the replacement of those pipes.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. I might just, if you don't mind, Councillor Braithwaite, just follow up on that. I think this is triggered to my mind. We've had incidents where development has been stalled or had to have a fairly thorough review to understand the downstream impacts. Particularly, even though the age isn't directly relevant, if there's a significant amount of I&I into the sewer systems, we may still have issues there on heavy rain events and things that, the added capacity on top of that might create some concern. Is there any mechanism within this, just, in those cases, perhaps even temporarily, where staff are concerned about it, that there could be some sort of tick box that says on application, a review will be, undertaken, and the Director of Engineering has the right to hold a suites until such a review is completed or until they sign off on it. I think it would be very, very unusual, but I can knowing the age of our infrastructure and pieces and some of these past events, it might come up. I'm just wondering if it's an as of right, is that something that's an option, or is it just not? Is there no mechanism for doing that check in the process?
Through the chair, if the secondary suite use is provided as of right, then it wouldn't be a zoning trigger. But then the trigger then would come at time of building permit. So if there was something in the building permit processes that allowed you to look at the capacity of the system, and through your subdivision and development servicing bylaw, there may be a process in there that the building permit then triggers the review. And then as you mentioned, Chair, there may be a way to at least hold that building permit until such time as you can review it. How long you can hold that and what comes out of that is something that I would defer to staff on.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. Sorry, Councilor Braith, I just thought I'd get some more clarification on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll pass for now.
Okay,
Chair,
there
thank
were
you.
actually no more hands at this point, so there we go. Councilor Green and Patterson.
And thank you, Mr. Wong, for your presentation. I just wanted to ask a question, and you may or may not be able to answer this, and it is a rather difficult question to ask, but I was just wondering, do you believe there is a correlation between a stable growth rate or a stalled growth rate in a community and its ability to create housing accessibility? Has that ever come up in your work and studies? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Green. Mr. Wong?
Could you reframe the question, Councilor Green?
Yes, I just wondered if this is an issue that has ever come up for you, because I notice in the report our growth rate has stalled at just over 18,000 people, and it has not grown significantly for a number of years. Is it possible that part of that reason that we are stalled on growth is that it's because we may not have created more accessible housing and may have created barriers, in fact, to housing in Oak Bay? Thank you.
You're speaking for accessibility in the sense of people with disabilities or mobility pieces?
Or housing options for anyone.
Oh, for housing options. Okay. Yeah. I think we've identified that in the housing needs study already, but yeah, Mr. Wong, feel free to answer.
Through the chair, thank you, Councilor Green, for the reclarification. Certainly, the diversity of housing options has direct links to the affordability matrix, as you've seen in the housing needs report. Through our work in the community and meeting a number of folks in the community at the open houses, they certainly had identified the wanting to have an opportunity to age in place and stay in the community, ideally stay in their home or move and downsize to another home in Oak Bay, and not finding the ability to do that. So I think it is more certainly a diversity of housing options and housing stock will provide that more fulsome spectrum of housing choices. And I think would help to ensure that folks that want to stay here and age in place can do that, and folks that want to move into Oak Bay have the ability to do that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Go ahead, Councilor Green.
Thank you. And Mr. Wong, through you, Mayor, in the report, we hear some comments such as people who have suites should pay their fair share. Were people able to more clearly articulate how they define what fair share means or what that looks like for them? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wong.
Through the chair, I think some of the opportunities to contribute had to do with taxes. And just the way, again, the way the units are structured, it's not a separate strata unit, and so there aren't two titles to that. So there won't be two tax notices. That said, as people come in for building permits to do the improvements to their units, that building permit will show up, as an improvement to their assessed value. So there will likely be an increase to the assessed value based on the improvement to the single-family house, and therefore there's some tax dollars that may flow back into the community that way. The rest would, I think that the fair share had to do with the impact on infrastructure and other services. And as noted, there are some abilities for the district to recoup that through user pay for the infrastructure pieces, and then others as potentially an increase to the assessed value on the property tax.
Thank you.
Thank you. And one last question of Mr. Wong. Mr. Wong, you've suggested that we would have to amend our existing zoning bylaw 3351. We are looking at, on the books down the road, a review of our zoning bylaw or a major zoning bylaw revision. So in fact, would it be possible then to accommodate suites earlier than say 2023, which is when I believe on strategic priorities the zoning bylaw review is estimated to occur. So in the meantime, we could though make amendments to the zoning bylaw that were appropriate to accommodate suites. Is that right?
Thank you, Councillor Green. I believe that is correct, but go to Ms. Varela. Did you want to answer that or no?
Your Worship, certainly work plans are subject to adjustment. It is a level of a detail. We're trying to get direction on the guiding attributes in November, and then we could shake out the more detailed implementation schedule after that, because there's a lot of touchstones coming up for council after you give that high-level decision in a November meeting on the attributes contained on page 3 and 4. And again, depending on council's approach, we'll develop a work plan accordingly, and council will determine that work plan schedule.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Varela. And Mr. Wong, thank you very much. I don't have any more questions at this time, and thank you for an excellent and detailed report.
Thank you. I'm just going to go around to first-time speakers first before I get back to you, Councillor Patterson and Councillor Braithwaite. If you have any follow-ups, go ahead, Councillor Ney.
Thank you, through you, Mayor, to Mr. Wong. Thank you very much for the report and overview and compilation of everything that we've been doing over the past couple of years. My question has to do with the parking issue. Something we have yet to make a decision about, as I understand it. And I'm wrestling with this off-street or not off-street parking. And you've provided us with a nice overview of what some neighboring or comparable communities have done around off-street parking, where most but not all have provided one off-street parking. I noticed Esquimalt did not do that. And what was also interesting was the number of complaints that were coming in, and I did notice Esquimalt that does not include off-street parking for a secondary suite in their program has had no complaining about that. And I also note that in terms of the community input around off-street or not parking for secondary suites, though about 50% said that they wanted the off-street, almost 40% said that they didn't want the additional off-street parking. And there were discrepancies whether it was a new suite or existing. There was a large number of community members who thought existing suites shouldn't have it. So one of the issues is, for me anyways, is the additional off-street parking is, I'm trying to think sort of holistically about this decision. And one of the issues is you put another parking pad on a property, you're taking away green space, issues of tree and whether they can get a parking pad on the property becomes an issue. But I'm also thinking, and then I'm thinking we've got streets that some are congested and many are not, and why aren't we using that space? We're already paying a lot of money and using up otherwise green space for the street. So for the parking, should I say. So what the other issue that I'm thinking about is whether this is an opportunity to incentivize or disincentivize car use, depending on how we decide to include parking or not in this program. And as I think that one through, then I'm thinking, there's a place in the report where you point out the issue with on-street parking, that it contributes to congestion. And if that is a key consideration, which I would understand, how would we know? Like, some streets are empty most of the time, and there are others that are congested. So how would you help us to inform that decision? Do you have any data or way for us to assess how many streets in our community would experience overload on the street, on their street, if we didn't include off-street parking for secondary suites?
Thank you, Councillor Ney. A lot of sort of context there in terms of parking as a piece. I think it's something we're going to have to come back to and really tease out in November as we get down to that. Mr. Wong, I will invite your comment on that. Obviously, it's a significant part of suites implementation in every jurisdiction.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair to Councillor Ney, there's certainly a lot in there to unpack, and certainly an issue that every community faces and does need to balance, encouraging alternative uses to the vehicle, but as well as you mentioned, Councillor Ney, balancing that with potential loss of green space, on the individual property. To your question about each block, yeah, absolutely. There isn't, are there parking challenges within Oak Bay? Yes, in some areas. Are there some blocks that have no parking challenges? Absolutely. So without doing a block by block parking assessment, which we have done in some other communities for different reasons in different areas, it's really hard to provide those analytics for that. So that's why we provided the opportunity to allow for a variance process, which council has the ability to vary that requirement. If somebody would come in and say, "Hey, I've done an assessment on my street, and there is no parking challenge on my street. Oh, and by the way, the neighbors support that parking variance because of that. And so that at this point was the opportunity to provide that. And if council is seeing a number of variances as you're going through this process and monitoring it, that may be something that you may want to change in the future. And so, as I mentioned, the examples of the communities that the comparison communities do have as their baseline that additional space. There are some communities that don't require that additional parking space. One of them being the City of Victoria, which does not require an additional parking space for a secondary suite. So they have chosen, carte blanche to not allow that. And so, but we felt that based on the feedback that we heard, there was still arguments for parking and arguments to not require that additional parking space. This was kind of the starting point to start with the one, but acknowledge that there are potential blocks within the community that might not need it, and therefore the variance process is open to any applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Are there other questions here, members of council? Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Wong, for your presentation, and glad to be arriving at this juncture. Just wondering whether you might comment a little bit on one of the things that the housing needs assessment showed us, and it is referenced in your report as well, is the difficulty of getting a firm read on the amount and nature of units being offered in the secondary rental market. Because by definition, as suites are not regulated in Oak Bay right now, we don't have any way to monitor those things. So in terms of tracking, because the secondary rental market is so significant in Oak Bay, despite the fact that we don't have really good data on, again, locations and quantity, type, etc. I wonder whether you might comment on the effectiveness or the potential benefits of the regulation scheme and bringing this into a regulatory scheme to get a better read on what that secondary rental market looks like and how that helps to plan for additional rental units if necessary.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Mr. Wong?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Appleton, that is kind of the crux of moving forward, especially from a monitoring perspective. While suites continue to be unregulated, it is really hard to pin down exactly how many suites are within the community, and therefore that's why you see ranges of between 500 and 800. And so this, I'm not going to presume that this is going to change overnight. This will be, over a number of years of implementation, of collaboration with the community, of education and informing. And over time, we will start seeing both new suites. If council chooses to move forward on this framework, they would see both new suites within new buildings as well as new suites within existing buildings. And you'll then be able to start, creating your database of what's working and what might not be working, and then you would change that over time as well too. But until that program is in place, you can't. It becomes really hard for you to adjust while all suites currently are not legal and are essentially underground. So,
thank you, Mr. Wong. Councillor Appleton? Nope, we're completed. Any other first-time questions? Councillor Zelka, did you wish to speak?
Jared. Yes, thank
Go
you
ahead.
very much. I appreciate that. If I may?
Go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you to Mr. Wong for the very good presentation. I've much appreciated the data, and I do look forward to talking more about this as we move forward. I noted you mentioned to Councillor Braithwaite with respect to how many homeowners avoided regulations due to cost and other things, and that you may be able to supply additional data with respect to the uptake. I note on page 17 of your report, you talk about context. Let's see if I can find it here. Oh dear, where did it go? Oh, I think I just lost it. But you speak about the context of the 5 comparison local authorities. Where apparently there was approximately 60% secondary suites in some communities, and in Salish apparently there were 33% secondary suites by some measurement. So, with respect to that context, will you be able to tell us or provide the numbers with respect to at regulation time, what was the uptake and were they able to convert all of the illegal suites into the regulatory scheme?
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I think this is the same point touched on earlier by Councillor Appleton. I think the ability to get real data and knowing if we're being successful or not is difficult. Mr. Wong, can you give us any sage advice here in terms of knowing what the success ratios were of other approaches, and any ways that you see as helping us bring people forward to participate in this in a regulated market?
thank you, Chair. Through you to Councillor Zelka. Thank you. So the table that Councillor Zelka was referring to is page 17 of the final strategy, and it does have some numbers from the different communities, Sydney, Esquimalt, and Salish. If this is something that council is interested in a follow-up, it wouldn't take us much to at least follow up with those communities that we have our contacts with to find out what that uptake might be. Every community is going to be different depending on the resources that they have to follow up on the level of education and just the level of development in the communities. So it will be a varying and probably relatively kind of a slow but consistent uptake with respect to secondary suites. And so, as I said, as I'm looking at the context for Chilliwack, it's this growing acceptance for community support for secondary suites. So we could certainly follow up from Chilliwack and try and quantify what that growing acceptance might be. But from our experience, it's generally been kind of slow and steady as the community has resources to continue to work with applicants to both educate and inform folks about the regulation of secondary suite.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Very, very helpful. And yes, if there's any way to get something quantified in terms of what slow acceptance means, that would certainly help to provide a context for and also with resourcing. One community that I was watching over the last couple of years was the community of Delta, not far from Swanson, in terms of their secondary suite program, where they started, I guess, with many of the aspects of fees up front and making it cost neutral and charging utility fees and all these other things. And I think they got a maximum of 5 people applying in total, with many illegal suites still in existence. And then when they started to shut down the suites, there was such an outcry that they started to drop all the fees in terms of the experience happening in that particular local authority. So it would be helpful to see what happened in those contexts of the 5 ones that you identified to help us with our resourcing. Because if there's only going to be 5 come forward, maybe we don't have to worry about this. But if there's a way that we can, finish the road, actually get everything regulated, whatever that means, in terms of both the existing plus setting up for the new housing stock, purpose-built secondary suites, that would be very, very helpful. Is that something that could possibly be done before this comes back to council?
Mr. Wong?
Through the chair, we can certainly follow up with the 5 communities and provide an update to council. Thank you, and thank you so much to the chair. I would very much appreciate that. I just want to ask you a couple of fundamental questions. The very, very beginning of your study overview, page 1, in fact, of your study, the fundamental OCP statement is to develop a policy and regulatory framework for secondary suites as a way of providing affordable housing in the community. This report doesn't talk about affordable housing, though. It really just talks about various regulatory schemes. Could you explain how we'll be meeting the affordable housing intent of the initiative, please?
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Mr. Wong?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Zelka, I think it comes down to, as the housing needs assessment shows, is providing that choice, providing that legal choice in the community for a diversity of housing types. And so right now, there is not the ability to have a legal ability to reside in a secondary suite within the community without specific spot zoning that would have to come to council. So having a mechanism to have the ability to regulate and legalize secondary suites then provides that option for at least a relatively more affordable rental option within the community that doesn't legally exist today.
Okay. Thank you. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that really what we're addressing is the housing options. And if there are housing options, maybe as a mortgage helper, then even though with a suite in a property, the cost of the property is going to go up because of highest and best use and real estate principles. So the cost of the house, no matter what, if there's a secondary suite, there's more money available from the bank, and the cost is going to go up. So you now have a higher priced house. So then you now have a suite in it, and the owner has a mortgage helper. So they're going to want to try and I presume, get the highest rental they possibly can to help pay for this now larger mortgage. Am I getting the flavor of what is going to happen in terms of the cycle?
Mr. Wong?
Through Councillor Zalka, that may happen in some instances, but in other instances, it's not necessarily the case. Because just you know, some people may be able to legalize their suite right now without having to do major works, depending on the nature of the of the suite that's in there. So it's not necessarily the case in all instances. If it was a brand new build, any brand new build comes at potentially increased costs, and therefore that they may be reflected in the new price, but it's not necessarily the case.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. Like final aspect about this, in terms of the first principles, is how will we measure that this is working out okay, that we're actually getting somewhere, and that we're actually achieving the OCP objectives with respect to, in particular, that very first one, providing affordable housing. How will we measure this to know that we are succeeding? Or how have other local authorities measured it?
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Mr. Wong, any suggestions on what has worked in other jurisdictions and how we might look at measurement over time?
Thank you, to Chair, to Councillor Zelka. Certainly, just the number of conversions or legalizations of suites is one. The creation of new housing with suites in it is another as well too. And then just looking at the average rental, in the community, the number of units that come on stream from a rental perspective as well too. You can look at that as well too. So those are kind of three potential metrics that you might look at as you move through this.
Go ahead.
One of the numbers that I'm hoping that we can also derive out of this, assuming the program moves forward, is how much do other taxpayers in the district effectively subsidize those who are moving forward if we don't implement any fees. And it'll be interesting to see how we can we can quantify that. In other words, the absolute cost of the additional staff, the absolute cost of the regulatory scheme, and whether we collect fees or not, whether it's self-maintaining or not. And if it's not, then the money has to come from taxes, which effectively ends up being a subsidy provided by the other homeowners in the district. So I'm not sure whether that'll be a sort of a success measure, but I certainly will be interested to know, and I'm sure our citizens will want to know how much this whole program is going to cost, and the effect on the taxes that they'll be paying. Is this something that other local authorities are grappling with as well?
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. And I'll just point out that this is part and parcel of our conversation as a council. I think the choices that we make will really come back to that philosophy of are we making sure that we're not adding costs, or are we willing to accept some additional costs, or are we looking at impacts on infrastructure in a different way, and those sorts of questions. So ultimately it will be this council's philosophical approach that will guide those pieces. But Mr. Wong, your experience in other jurisdictions and looking at this, have you any reflection on their philosophical approach to managing costs versus benefit?
Through the chair, through Councillor Zelka, specific to secondary suites, probably I wouldn't say as much. I mean, they're certainly looking at kind of that whole spectrum of the residential tax base versus the commercial and other tax base, as well as full cost recovery for the services that it provides. But specific to secondary suites, no, in our experience, that really hasn't been a specific measure, nor generally does the word subsidy for secondary suites generally come out in those community discussions. On that broader context of full cost recovery, that does come into play, but not specific to secondary suite.
Well, Thank you. I think I've heard it, other local authorities refer to it as user pay as opposed to, and if the user's not paying, then it's being subsidized effectively. I mean, because the money has to come from somewhere. So will user pay, yes or no, basically is the question I would be asking. And it sounds like other local authorities have tried to have user pay, such as the one I mentioned, Delta, and then they ended up in the end dropping all their fees because of they couldn't get the uptake. So I do look forward to your numbers. That would be excellent. So if I may go on, please, with one more question, or no, two more questions, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. When some of these reports were being done over the last couple of years, we had an incredibly low vacancy rate. And maybe as a result of the pandemic, as a result of people realizing they can actually work from home, they don't have to drive into an office, and the fact that people are now leaving the cities and buying less expensive houses elsewhere and working from there. And of course, this wonderful technology, which is facilitating, for example, me being at home, attending this meeting live with you, and others being able to do the same thing from the middle of nowhere in British Columbia. The vacancy rate in Oak Bay, according to CMHC, is now in the approximately 1% range, whereas before it was 0.1. And across all of the Victoria area, it's at 2.2%, which is actually incredibly healthy vacancy rate. And if you go out even further, the vacancy rate is even quote better, or there's more vacancy. I'm not quite sure how to describe it as better or worse, but depending on whether you're a homeowner trying to fill an empty unit. In other words, I'm trying to say there's lots of empty units out there, and I'm wondering, this is hard to talk about, because going forward, here we are at this table trying to figure out a crystal ball. Is there any indication, either from the local authorities or from some of the numbers you may have seen through CMHC or elsewhere, will people be coming back into the cities to fill these empty suites that are still that right now are going wanting for people? Is there any way that you can help us figure out what that may look like going forward? Of course, it'll also feed into the whole resourcing issue.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I'm just going to ask, we're at 9:45. We officially have 15 minutes left in this meeting. We have public to get to and some more discussion. So if we can get to questions quickly, that'll help us move things along a little bit. Mr. Wong, any response to Councillor Zelka?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Councillor Zelka. I wasn't aware of some of the newer vacancy numbers. Moving into at least the 1% range in Oak Bay, which is still, not, from a CMHC perspective, still, not certainly not from a healthy perspective as part of the housing needs assessment. I guess just anecdotally, everything that I've seen at this point still show that there's definitely a rental crunch within the community, and so. I think anything that we can do, knowing that these housing moves in cycles, to provide additional supply in the marketplace is something that I think all communities are looking to support, providing additional supply where possible.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you. One more question and then possibly a follow-up. We have, according to your report on page 4, as of 2016, we have 23, almost 24% of the tenure of households. 24% approximately are renters. So the whole house is rented out with, I presume, an absentee owner. So we've talked about owner occupancy. If this program was going to go forward, I would definitely want owner occupancy to be an absolutely a rock solid part of the program going forward. However, with 24% of houses being renter occupied, not owner occupied, is it possible that, and of course the reason we all want this is so that the police aren't acting as the concierge and dealing with issues. The actual someone in the house ideally would be helping to deal with any potential local issues. I think that let me just sort of say that in in a very, not very well way, but I think that's generally catches the idea. So the question is there any way that we could set up this so that the main tenant, probably with the permission of the absentee owner, could also be acting as an owner-occupier of the property, and could then the renter themselves could do the secondary suite?
Mr. Wong, your understanding of owner occupancy, could you clarify that in regard to Councillor Zelka's question?
To clarify, the owner occupancy generally means that, yeah, the person who's on title of the house would either have to live in the main part of the house or the secondary suite.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Councillor Zelka?
So I certainly wouldn't want to, shall we say, disenfranchise the 24% of the renters if we were going to move forward with this program. Is there a way that we could, through regulations or through some aspects of this, include in owner occupancy the master tenant holder of the building, who also could be standing in, maybe with permission of the owner, as the acting as the owner in this case?
Go ahead, Mr. Wong. I think that would basically not be owner occupancy at that point. Mr. Wong?
Would not be, through the chair, would not be owner occupancy at that point. I was trying to clarify the 24% renter on page 4, which, so just to clarify that the 24% renters includes all households in Oak Bay. So that would be all types of housing, of which in Oak Bay only 63% is a single detached house, and then the other 22% are apartments fewer than 5 stories, 4% are apartments 5 or more stories. And so it's the suites would only be within the 63% of the households within Oak Bay, anyways. And so I'm just trying to, I guess, kind of square that comment about where the 24%, the majority of those 24% renters live in apartment buildings or condos, of which secondary suites would be part of.
Thank you very much. There is some percentage of the single family homes that are rented. I don't know exactly what it is, but we have some. So what I'm hearing you say is that owner occupancy is really literally the owner on title. And in terms of what other local authorities have done, they haven't considered a way where the master tenant could be a stand-in for the owner in a situation such as this, where a scheme could be set up where there was someone responsible for the house who would then act as the person who then does the secondary suite. In other words, if we go forward with this, with an owner occupancy aspect, the renters would not be able to participate.
Through the chair, I'm not aware of a community that has a master renter as the kind of that primary occupant. There is one, I believe, at least one, which allows for owner occupancy could also include a property management company. And so that could potentially be another way to kind of provide that oversight that that council may be looking for. And so then they don't necessarily have to live in there, but at least there's an assurance there that it's being managed.
Thank you.
Very much appreciated. And I'm nearly done, Chair. Just wanted to say thank you so much for the clarifications on this information. Just touching briefly on the guiding attributes. I do note that staff is bringing forward something about guiding attributes. I was a bit unsure what it meant, since it seemed to be capturing comments from councillors. But I do, the comment that wasn't captured is that I'm adamantly opposed to anything having to do with secondary suites. I'm one of the never secondary suites people, shall we say. However, if it's going to go forward, then I'll certainly want to be going with the most restrictive version possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka, for the comments. I just procedurally here want to get to the public to give them an opportunity to speak. I do have a couple of questions I want to get to first, but I just want to encourage anybody who is at home wishing to speak. You can do so now. You can call in and then hit *9 to raise your hand, and we'll get to you in the speaking orders. We also procedurally need to move this to 10:30 to finish up. I think we're going to need that much time to get through this. So I do not want to go past 10:30 if we can possibly avoid it, as we're not making decisions here. We're just getting clarification as we go. So do we have a mover and a seconder to extend to 10:30? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion on the extension? Don't see any. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. So we are carrying through to 10:30. Mr. Wong, I'll keep my questions brief, but one question I really have is there any mechanism, the fees and the approach discussed to date has seemed to be around use. So if someone builds a suite, then we start charging them or have that. Is there any examples of places that have essentially charged for use? So someone who may want to activate their basement for living for a year or two could do that, pay the fee for the time that they're doing it, and then if they're not actually actively using it for a household, that they wouldn't be paying the fees again. I'm just trying to think of ways of allowing people to sort of not have heavy investments but still move forward. And I think that would be one. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Is there any jurisdictions that have taken more of a use approach as opposed to a building form approach?
Through the chair, I suppose you could use the business license approach for that, and so then that would only apply when it's actually being occupied and used. And so if it's no longer being used, then and you wanted to use it for, say, a family member or something like that. But other than that, I think council certainly and the community certainly expressed the interest in making sure that it at least meets a health and safety requirement for code, and so you would need to at least bring it up to that kind of that health and safety piece as well. So.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned the business license, but that wouldn't be the only option in terms of fees, would it? I mean, there would be other mechanisms if we wanted to tackle that. It's just a use fee.
Yes, I mean, yeah, there could be some form of registration, which some communities have used.
Okay, very good. And I think I'll leave my other questions. They're really more philosophical discussions that I want to get to at the next meeting. But Councillor Patterson, can you hold the question until after I go to the public, and then we'll come back to this table for additional questions and comments before we sign off. So with that, I'm going to just ask, is there any member of the public that wishes to speak? If you're on the phone, you can hit *9 to raise your hand, or if you're in the Zoom call, you can use the reactions tab at the bottom of the screen and click raise hand, and that should show up on our screens here as someone indicating they wish to speak. And again, the 1-800 number and passcode, et cetera, are on the screen right now. So if anybody wishes to speak, we'll go to you at this time. And if you don't feel comfortable speaking, you can always send an email to obcouncil@okbay.ca. Your correspondence will be included in the next meeting so that it's available for us to consider your input as well, which is another very efficient way of sharing comments with all of council. I just want to give this a minute because as I noted earlier, there is a bit of a time delay. There's a bit of a time delay in terms of the where if people are watching the streaming, they may not know they're supposed to call in at this point. So I'll give it a minute for people to call the 1-855 number. But not seeing any hands up at this point, Ms. Williams. So I think I'll go back to the public again in a minute. But just in the interest of managing time, we had a couple of councillors, I think, that indicated they wish to speak. So I'll go through those, but if a member of the public does raise their hand, I will go to them before we wrap this up. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson, and then Councillor Braithwaite.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to Mr. Wong. Something that came to my attention, and I never thought of it before as either a problem or a control mechanism, but in looking at it, I know that it has actually been considered, certainly within the region, by other local governments, and that is restricting the total number of kitchens within a single-family dwelling, including the secondary suites, so that they may not exceed 2. I didn't realize that was a problem. before, but and so I'm just wondering if Mr. Wong could comment on restricting the number of kitchens in a dwelling to two as another control mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Mr. Wong?
Thank you, Chair. Through to Councillor Patterson, that certainly is something that we could look into. The definition of a secondary suite is generally a unit that has a separate kitchen and a separate entrance. And so there are some communities which have, what have been referred to as either summer kitchens or in-law suites where they have two kitchens in the house, but you can free flow, in and out of that unit. And so the suite, the definition of the suite would have to have that separate unit. Without getting into, I guess, an option of, an outdoor kitchen, does that count as well too? But that is something that we would explore, given council's direction, as part of the text amendment to the zoning bylaw. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Thank you, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Braithwaite, and Councillor Green.
Thank you so much, Chair. So I'm going to go back to the parking just for a minute. So on page 34, it says a large number of existing single families could not accommodate the additional off-street parking requirements. And you mentioned that City of Victoria doesn't require additional parking. And I would say that you can really tell that as soon as you cross from Okabe into City of Victoria by the number of cars and boats and trailers in the street. It's quite high. And I'd even say that on my own street, it's become really apparent that there's a high number of suites because the parking has increased and it's quite crowded now on my street to the point where it's really hard for the garbage trucks to even get up and down the street safely. And I know they have hit a car actually on my street at one point in time. So parking is really a huge thing to me, and I'd want to see it really regulated. And I also on page 18, it says, and I think this came straight from the OCP, that increase housing while maintaining neighborhood character. And to me, the parking on the street might not maintain the neighborhood character. But the reason I'm asking this, or the reason I'm talking about this, is because you also talked about parking for secondary suites, but not boarders. And I think that a lot of boarders are probably younger students, but a lot are also university-age students or adults. And so your report suggests that we should allow secondary suites and boarders. So then how would this impact the parking if we allowed both to have secondary suites and up to 2 boarders per house? Would that double the parking requirements? Would we have to write that into our bylaws?
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Mr. Wong?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Braithwaite, the current parking bylaw requires that a unit that has boarders requires 1 off-street parking space. And so if council kept that the same and did the text amendment to the parking bylaw to require 1 additional parking space for the secondary suite, then if you had a parcel that had both a secondary suite and boarders, if council chose to go down that route, would require 1 each for the suite and the boarders, so an additional 2, if that was the direction that was provided.
Councillor Braithwaite?
Thank you. So that might be, to me, an indication that perhaps I wouldn't want to allow boarders and secondary suites in the same house. And lastly, I know that I found it really interesting. On page 52, one point says that only half of the tenants said that their landlord lives in their building, though most owners said that they live in the building where their suite is located. I found that really interesting. I'm not sure how you explain this and what that does to the data that you're collecting.
Mr. Wong, any comment?
I'd have to look into that, Chair. Other than, we acknowledge that this is for information, so that council can make informed decisions about the community. And so, we have to trust what is provided to us, and then review it as we go through. So I don't have a comment specific to that potential discrepancy.
It may just be that people don't always tell the truth when they're answering surveys.
Gosh, imagine that.
Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite. Anything else? All right. We have Ms. McDougall just wishes to add a comment, I think. Ms. McDougall?
Yes, so just for context, it could quite likely be possible that the people responding, well, it is anonymous, so we can't say for sure, but the people responding to one of the questions might not be the same overlap of people, so it might not be the same tenants and landlords responding to the survey, just for context.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. And I also sometimes wonder if people understand the difference between responding as a renter in an apartment and answering that question, which would be almost zero owner piece but they may still be answering as a rental. So I can certainly see a rationale for that. Is there another caller, Ms. Williams? It's not popping up on my screen here. So, let me check my phone.
Yes, Your Worship. The caller has messaged and would like to speak. It's a Mr. Mears.
Okay, very good. Is he on the phone? Okay, thank you. So, Ms. McDougall, if you could just lower your hand again, so that clears it off my screen. And if we could have Mr. Mears, you're welcome to join our meeting and address council. Welcome, Mr. Mears. If you could just state your name and municipality of residence, that would be helpful at the beginning. Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes, and welcome.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Mr. Mears. Welcome.
Anthony Mears, South Oak Bay. I've been waiting. There's something wrong with the system. I don't want my 3 minutes to start yet. This is the third time I've called in, and they've told me that there's 13 or 14 people waiting. I waited all night to speak to this item, and then you said there was no one waiting, so I hung up and recalled, and they said 6 people waiting, and now I'm the only person that's going to speak, I guess. So something's wrong that you didn't have me on the list in the first place. I registered twice. So anyway, I want to get started now. So first of all, I wanted to say that this is the first time that the public have had a chance to speak to this report, and I'm not going to get into what's wrong with the report. I think it's got a lot of misinformation, a lot of missing information, a lot of inaccurate information or incorrect information. So I will touch on the fact that I'll use up a minute of my 3 minutes, saying that the comparison municipalities did not provide information about how successful these sanctions were, that the regulations that were being discussed in Oak Bay. I find that the fact that there's no information, as Councillor Zelkers pointed out, on the uptake on the number of suites. Now, these municipalities have regulated suites for quite a long time now, and there's plenty of information about the uptake. I mean, Saanich had 2,000 10 years ago. They have 9,000 now. Vancouver had 25,000 10 years ago. They have 80,000 now. Delta, Councillor Zelkers explained. And you've got Surrey, the same deal. I'm sure some of these municipalities have some idea about what their uptake has been. Victoria certainly does. So I think that information would be really, really useful if we were going to move ahead with this. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot more unregulated suites. I mean, we're dealing right now with these regulations that have been discussed all night with a perfect world. We don't have a perfect world. We have an imperfect world. We know that these people aren't going to come forward, so you can have regulations coming out of your ears, but you're not going to get anywhere. I mean, I work with permits and licenses extensively as a social planner on this, and there's so much information on the impacts and how difficult it is. The secondary suite guidelines for the province tell you that the uptake is very, very slow, and even the consultant that helped with that report says the same thing. They also say that small municipalities find it very expensive to have secondary suite programs, and it's very challenging, which means it's very costly. And right now, looking down the barrel of a 12% tax increase, it doesn't look all that promising if we're going to spend a lot of money on that, especially when we're going to have a lot more unregulated suites. Anyway, I don't want to deal with that. That's my minute, I take it. I want to deal with the process. So this report was provided in 220, December 220. It was provided January 11th, 221, and there was no public input. It was promised in March. That didn't happen. Then it was promised in May. That didn't happen. Then it was promised in July, and that didn't happen. So there's been no public input to date. The report's not online. The report, the secondary suite study report or strategy, whatever you want to call it, is not, wasn't provided with the survey. It's got a lot of information in there. The only way that the public could have understood where this report was if they happened to listen to those two meetings that I referenced earlier. So really, the only opportunity now, and in September, it was indicated that there will be public input into this secondary suite study report in September. In July, that was stated. Now it's come forward in October, but at the last, not even minute, the last second, where it's going to be finalized. And it looks like, from what I read in the report, it's a done deal. That's unacceptable. I mean, that doesn't meet any kind of international standard of public engagement. And I think that we've got to get on that track. I think that there needs to be, I mean, there's a lot of information in there that's very questionable. Even some of the answers tonight were very questionable. So I think council has to take a second look at this. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Mr. Mears, I just want to clarify. So we have an obligation, and staff have an obligation, the consultant has an obligation as a professional planner to be accurate, or as accurate as possible, by professional ethics. So it's not acceptable to start questioning the intent behind any of that. We can disagree, and we can have a discussion about how to implement or not implement, and suites. But I just want to make sure that we're having this conversation in a.
The phone, I can hear on my quite well on my speakers, but with the phone's only as good as the microphones, and I can hear Councillor Zelka and a couple other people, but it's difficult to understand you. I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm whatever your answer is, I can't hear it. I could hang up and listen to it on my other speakers if you like.
I think the message is importantly just shared amongst the community, but I just want to make sure that we're having a respectful conversation, and we're treating it's an issue. It's a long-standing issue. I think it's worth pointing out a couple of pieces. First, I just want, unrelated to this, but the comment on the 12% tax increase, that is not contemplated. That's a totally separate issue, but we're looking at addressing the infrastructure deficit over time. And that is a representation of the overall cost over time. I've heard that repeated through a false missive sent by email as a fear piece, and it's very unreasonable. And I just want to make sure anybody listening understands that is not on the books for us and never been contemplated. It's just the overall costs facing us over time. I also just want to say this is not a done deal. The whole point of this tonight is to carry this forward as part of the process. We're having a chance to speak to the consultant and to staff to clarify, to understand, and we'll get to the debate portion of this. I do appreciate there are sometimes never enough opportunities for public input, and we are certainly have been hamstrung in this process a bit by the pandemic and the impacts of that. But perhaps, I'm not sure if Mr. Wong might be able to address, there was a portal up with the survey and reports and background information that was there as we went through that process. But I can't recall now, it's been going on for 3 years, the number of times that we've invited public input. And certainly, I will say this again and again, any information that people want to bring forward to council, send us by email at obcouncil@oakbay.ca. That does get to us. We will consider it. the intention here is to think through all of the positive and negative impacts that are possible and come up with an approach and a balanced model that maximizes the upside and minimizes the risks and the downsides. And so that's our job. And we will always appreciate information that comes forward that allows, that informs that decision-making process. So Mr. Wong, I'm not sure if you are the appropriate person or not to speak to the consultation process and any of the public input pieces.
Thank you, Chair. In the staff report, I believe it's on page 11, did identify the different council resolutions and the process over the last 3 years. And as you noted, there were two rounds of engagement in the community, one in person, which we were able to do in 2019, including an open house as well as pop-ups. And then, of course, the second one was virtual through the survey. But as you mentioned, Chair, every opportunity that this report was presented in a public forum in December, in the new year. We were at APC twice. I think we were probably in front of council at least 3 or 4 times. They've all been done in the public commons with opportunities for input from the community, as you've identified there. So 2 formal rounds of engagement plus every opportunity as we've presented this in a public forum for public feedback.
Thank you. My other observation on that is this is a meaty piece of information and hard to get to the public. And I think the more time that the public has this final report to distill and consider, that's beneficial. And council may wish to consider, as we move into the deciding factors and giving some more direction, that we consider some additional pieces attached to that as we sort of firm these up a little bit. That may be easier for people to digest a more sort of a comprehensive approach. But I think we'll leave that till we get to the next phase if we can give some clear direction. Councillor Green, you wanted to add?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I do want to add some comments because I'm aware that this community has been involved actively and engaged since 2010 on the issue of secondary suites. This is not a new issue. It's been kicking around for a long time. And in fact, a planner friend said to me that early discussions actually began in 2005. So I think the community has had numerous opportunities over the course of 10 or 11 years to continue to be aware of this issue and to participate. So I just want to make that clear because I think that the inference that the public hasn't been able to weigh in is not correct. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I mean, I'll never say how much is the right amount, but I think, again, we're always open to public input. So we have the formal pieces. We've done that through surveys. Please do write to us and discuss with us because I think we definitely want to be making these decisions in the right context. Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate what Councillor Green said. It's been going on so long that it's a moving picture because we didn't have things like Airbnb when it first started. So the longer it goes on, it keeps morphing, and it's a moving target. But nevertheless, one thing I just want to add is that the report, and it does say in here that the report did go before the APC, and generally the APC was supportive of this, but when it was presented to the APC, it was really reported more as an information to the APC, and I think that the expertise around the table at the Planning Commission for Land is diverse and it's informed, and unfortunately there wasn't sufficient time at the meeting, and it is flagged in here. There were 3 elements certainly that they thought that more discussion was warranted on, and some of them came up again tonight. So what I would like to see is a referral of this back to the APC with this report so that they might then have the time to actually look at these 3 elements and come forward with their recommendation or cautions in a more fulsome way than was allowed at the first review that they had.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I just want for clarification, if anybody who doesn't have that pulled up, those were owner occupancy, parking, and registration were the three pieces of that they didn't have a chance to comment or to delve into. Councillor Green?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I would agree with Councillor Patterson that they also represent our community. All of them live in our community. I think it would be an excellent way to bring something to them that they haven't had a fulsome discussion on. And that would also be another form of community engagement because they live here, some work here, some have worked here, and it is a strong group of people, and I would think it would be very useful for us to have some feedback from them and give them more time to look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing nods around the table here a little on this one. So can I just get direction from staff in terms of timing? If we were to refer those items back to the Advisory Planning Commission, do we have a sense of when they meet, and does that impact our scheduled time? It doesn't mean that we can't do it. I'm just curious if there's a measure in there of consideration. Ms. Rella?
Thank you, Your Worship. So for clarification, it is my understanding that the APC specifically wanted council to talk more about those three issues. Referral back to APC is totally doable. It will affect the timeline of council making decisions on those attributes that are before you on pages 3 and 4 of the staff report. But again, the timeline is council's. We will have to work out a time when Mr. Wong is available to present and be present if the report in its entirety is going back. I think that's important as well. And that will be an additional meeting, but again, totally doable. So staff could take that away and come back, and it will just delay council's decision making. You won't be doing that in November likely.
Okay, thanks for clarification. So I think some clarification from this table, if it's the entirety of the report or the owner occupancy, parking, and registration portions. And I'll go back to you, Councillor Green, just because you're the liaison to advisory plan. Oh, sorry, Councillor Patterson.
Sorry, it's Councillor Patterson.
You're right. Sorry, Councillor Patterson on the Advisory Planning Commission. You were part of that conversation, so perhaps you understand what they were and were not able to discuss, and where you felt like they might have some additional interest in contemplating. So perhaps I'll give it to you to give some direction.
Yes, and thank you, Mayor, and the just as feedback on that, it was the time that was limited at the meeting. Many of the aspects of this were discussed. Those three were flagged as potential issue items, and the APC just ran out of time at that meeting to discuss them, and so they didn't get to them. So they flagged them as items that council then would need further discussion on, and so I think it would really be a useful exercise for the Advisory Planning Commission, who I see as potentially having a broader role in the whole housing framework as we move forward. But to take these items, because we've had discussions, some differing opinions here also at the council table, I think it would be useful to go back. I don't know that the full report, it would be necessary to have Mr. Wong present this full report again to the APC. I think that they could read it and then focus on those three elements and conclude their discussion and make any recommendations that they would like to make to council on them. So I would like to have them to have the opportunity. Unfortunately, the October meeting was canceled, so we didn't get a chance to take this to them, but it's just a timing issue. So, and as Councillor Green said, it's a good, diverse group of people, a varied age range of the members that are on the commission, and they come from all areas of the district. So, we would get a very broad interpretation of how these things might impact them. And specifically with parking and owner occupancy, I would really like to hear that discussion.
So I'm just going to get some direction from staff on what a appropriate motion would be, because we're not going to refer the whole matter, it sounds like, but really just referring those 3 items, owner occupancy, parking, and registration, to the Advisory Planning Commission for any additional comments. And those comments then can be included in our contemplation as it comes back to this table. Is a motion along like those 3 items to them for additional comments? Is that sufficient? Something along those lines, Ms. Varela?
If that's the input council is seeking, absolutely. The range, again, you could have the consultant come back. It is out of scope for the existing contract. But again, it's what council wants input on. So if you just want those 3 items referred back without the full report, for additional comment from the APC, we can make that happen.
Would you like to make a motion then, Councillor Patterson, since you have the most awareness here?
So I will move that council refer the report titled Secondary Suite Study, Final Strategy dated October 18th, 2021 to the Advisory Planning Commission Land to review and consider proposed strategy for elements on registration, owner occupancy, and parking.
Second.
So that's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that? I see Councillor Zelka, you have your hand up.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, you can hear me. Okay, good. Thank you very much. I'm very much in favor of referring this back to the APC, especially since it's touching on registration. I would hope that those numbers dealing with the context of the other local authorities might possibly, ideally, go in to help inform what the heck the registration would look like in terms of the experience of the other local authorities. That would the only part I would add, not necessarily add, but what would hope would be part of their discussion in terms of seeing how other local authorities did it, and to inform, again, our experience here. I'm very much in favor of this motion going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Speaking against the motion on the floor, it is not in my nature to vote in opposition to sending something to an advisory body. But I am, the fact that this has gone through the Advisory Planning Commission on a couple of different occasions, I don't want to speak for the members of the Advisory Planning Commission, but this is now a decision point for council. And this is something that the community expects, in my view, council to make a decision on, to have a robust debate on based on the public opinion we've had thus far, and to fundamentally get on with it. I was looking forward to and was committed to the idea of making the strategic decision on further course for secondary suites at the November council meeting. That, in my view, is when that conversation should happen. That incurring an additional delay I'm just not in favor of that. I think we have received a ton of information, a ton of input from the public, and it is now, in my view, rests with council to make the decision about moving this forward. This decision cannot be delayed beyond the 2022 strategic planning and budgeting process. It needs to be done in advance of that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. I hear what Councillor Appleton is saying. I wonder if there's a possibility of being able to have it put before APC before our meeting, so that we still could make that decision as planned at that council meeting in November. If not, then that's unfortunate. But I think that it really, to me, to wait another month before we make that decision, because we could then do it in the December council meeting, I would imagine. If we to get it right, I want to be able to get it right. So to wait an extra month, I'm okay with that. So I'll be voting for the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. You touched on a point, and I'll just leave it in staff's hands. If there's any possibility of jigging things in a way that you'd have a special meeting for APC or something along those lines, then we would do that. But I know how tight that is for staff abilities to get staff lined up and things for it. Ms. Varela, did you want to speak to that? I'm not going to put you on the spot to ask for that here. I just know that that was possible. It would be done, but.
Staff are indicating to me, Your Worship, that November 2nd is the next anticipated meeting date of the advisory body, so this could all be doable.
Okay. So we'll try very hard to get it back to the November meeting. Councillor Green?
No, I was just going to say that I certainly appreciate what Councillor Appleton is saying. There is a sense of urgency, both for me and for the community, and it's shared by many others, so I understand that. And I'm relieved that it's possible that there could be an early meeting. That was my point.
Thank you. I just need a motion to extend this meeting by another 15 minutes. Sorry, but we are not quite there yet. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Let's go ahead, Councillor Green. Anything else? Okay. And my apologies for letting this slip on time, but we do have to get through these discussions in a thorough way. So we have a motion on the floor right now to refer those 3 items with the report to the Advisory Planning Commission Land Use. Any additional discussion on that referral? No, I'll speak just briefly in favor of it. I think, especially if we can manage the timelines, I think, again, this is a decision that we should be making eyes wide open, and I would appreciate giving them that extra time out of courtesy to see if they have any other thoughts before it comes back here. But I'm very, very hopeful that it comes back in a time that allows us to discuss it in November. So thank you. All those in favor? And those opposed? Councillor Appleton opposed. That motion carries, so that matter is referred. It's still live on this table, however. The general piece, we need to get a motion to receive the report at the end of the day, moved and seconded. Before I call the question, though, I'll allow a bit of time just if anybody wishes to have any further discussion on the matter. Before recognizing we're not making decisions here, we're just coming back in November. Councillor Zelka?
Thank you very much. I presume we're receiving the study from Urban Systems, but not receiving the report from the planner at this time. Is that correct?
My understanding is we're receiving both. Yeah, that the report titled Secondary Suite Study, authored by Ms. McDougall, is be received, and that the Urban Systems report be received. Do you want me to separate those two?
Well, I prefer to divide the question, please.
I'm happy to do that.
If you don't mind, as the chair, if I may talk to or provide my comments.
Yeah, I'll divide them. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka. You may speak to either of those, and then I'll call the question separately.
Thank you. With respect to the study by staff, it makes reference to affordable house. Where is it? Oh God, it's in here. Guiding attributes, and I'm not quite sure what receiving the report means in terms of whether we are approving these or not, or whether like we haven't talked about it. So like about what staff is implying with these guiding attributes. So it would be helpful. It might take longer than 15 minutes to talk about the guiding attributes, or I'm gonna have to vote against this because I don't know what that means.
Sure, thank you, Councillor Zelka. It's a motion to receive, so that those. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Ms. Vrella. In terms of the guiding attributes provided, or reflections of the comments made at the last meeting, as I understand it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the guiding attributes did come out of council discussion to date. Those have not been endorsed by council resolution, and clearly around the table tonight, council is still weighing your preferred approach, and staff are awaiting direction from the table, but we anticipate that at a November meeting. So again, tonight was information, a chance for you to informally discuss with the consultant, hear from the public, and then we'll be asking for direction on those guiding attributes at a future meeting. So receiving the report does not endorse those as they're written.
Does that help clarify, Councillor Zelka?
That certainly does. I just wanted to confirm so I can vote in favor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion on the, just to wrap up before we call the question on the motion to receive, and I will call them separately, but I don't see any other hands up. I guess I'll just leave this as a thought as we go forward. We're anticipating probably more feedback from the public and from the Advisory Planning Commission. This is a whole, and so I think as we turn our minds to what is the best way to achieve the goals that are set out? So there's certainly things like affordable housing, diverse housing stock, but I think also the discussion around how do we create systems that actually do have high uptake, that have people actually bringing things forward to address things like protective services, so they know when people are living in buildings. How we find ways of creating fee structures or incentives to bring people forward. Because at the end of the day, this won't be successful if we get a very small percentage of suites registering. We need to have that a significant portion. And I think that as we think about this, how do we make this so that it's seen as a win by all aspects of the community in terms of providing this one, and it is only one small housing form, but it does help, how we can do that and implement it in a way that that will be successful for the community. So that's all I'll leave it with, is just as we come into November, as we're thinking about this, what does the whole look like, not just the individual pieces. So Councillor Green?
Yes, thank you. I just have an overall comment. I'm also hoping that we improve the culture and acceptance around renting and renters, because we don't require the same strictures for people who rent apartments. We don't require the same oversight, the same expectations around scrutiny. So I really want us to think philosophically and ideologically about the narrative about renters and secondary suites, because I have found that it's not always accepting and it's not always equitable and fair. So those are my comments going forward, and I'm hoping that we will have a really good discussion in November.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. Any other comments before we go here? Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Just out of interest, Mayor, and I know that this has been going on a long time, and I agree with Councillor Green's comments. I think it is there are many things to consider here, and certainly attitudes is one of them. But I will say that I have participated in the Canadian Real Estate Forum for more years than I will admit to, and you seldom hear very much in the Canadian Real Estate Forum, because it's generally more commercially driven, so you don't hear too much about residential. This is the first year. This September was the first year in all of the forums that I have attended that there was discussion and a clear statement from all membership, and it's directed because of participation of some of the real estate forums members in residential market now, that global housing market is broken and it's dividing entire countries. And there was a lengthy presentation on that. So this is one small thing that we do on secondary suites, but there's a shifting lens on residential throughout all markets globally. And so, as we struggle with some of this, it's not surprising, because there's it's a much bigger issue than what we have solutions to in this small municipality. So I just thought I'd throw that out just as an interesting comment.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I'm ready to call the question. So moving receipt on the staff report first. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. And moving receipt then on the secondary suites study from Urban Systems. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Councillor Zelka, you're opposed? Okay, I can register Councillor Zelka as opposed to receipt of the Urban Systems report. With that, we really are ready for a conclusion of the meeting.
Move adjournment.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good evening.
See you later. Cheers.
Oh.